Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link or prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin, but always make sure your arguments are LPP.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to this quasi-impromptu stream to review a very, very fascinating discussion that was had over on Trinity Radio the other day between, obviously, the hosts, Braxton and Jonathan, and they brought in Dr. Clay Jones, who's written a lot on one of the favorite talking points and things we hear ad nauseum from the atheists here on YouTube, and that's all about the problem of evil. How does God let bad things happen? And a variety of things in terms of heaven, hell. Why would God allow free will? Would God allow free will? Why do people let sin? Did He preordain everything? It was a very, very fascinating conversation, and as I listened to them talk live, I was like, man, I have got to review this incredibly insightful conversation between all these educated, very brilliant men, and hopefully we will trigger some atheists on YouTube, because it's kind of funny. I briefly stopped by to listen to the stupidity coming out of Speed of Pudding and the gang, and it was kind of entertaining to listen to them whine and complain, and they played a little short clip that Pine Creek apparently had cut out And then they proceeded to go on a diatribe about how, there was nothing to what they had said, and like issued all these interesting talking points that we hear all the time from the atheists on YouTube. And the irony of irony is that if you'd actually listen to the entire conversation, you would recognize that Dr. Jones addressed many of the talking points that they were spewing, and just using, putting Brain in the Gang as an example. But it's amazing how, like, one of them was even talking about, like, oh, well, if we unpack this, it's like, yeah, so you admit that you haven't actually observed or engaged in the conversation. You listen to a, couple second clip, and now you're accusing making this blanket assertion that, what's being said here doesn't address, all of the usual talking points. It just really fascinates me, folks. But anyway, I want to say thanks to everybody who's joined us. And I think Patrick's over on Twitch. I don't know why I even do that broadcast. Nobody's on Twitch, but we got, I think, Jerome. So he's got to go to bed. Jerome, thanks for swinging by. Wesley Coleman's in the house. Redefine Living. What's up, Sam? How are you? Jackson is here. He's really upset that I'm not already doing open discussion, because he wants to be first backstage and be able to get the first opportunity. The one and only Matt Man, also known as Young Earth Creation, is in the house. What's going on, brother? How are you? Stephanie's here. Utopia Buster, what's going on? How are you? Cheryl's in the house. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Landon just showed up too. What's up, Landon? How you doing? So thanks, everybody, for joining me for this. And I think without further ado, I was going to kind of get into this, and then once get into the meat of all this, probably open up the room, people can come in, and we can start having conversations, and we will see where the night takes us. But without further ado, let's get to playing. I think Dr. Jones is kind of going to give his backstory real quick.
Well, growing up, my father was an atheist and my mother was an astrologer, and together we attended the United Methodist Church.
Wow.
And now, my dad would say, if you push him, he said, I'm really an agnostic, but he was a hard-drinking, womanizing gambler that I didn't see for the first few years of my life. When I say my mother was an astrologer, I don't mean she read the thing in the newspaper. I mean, she had charts and graphs, and your moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter's aligned with Mars, and that kind of stuff.
Wow. Do you know what that's from?
No.
The Age of Aquarius.
That's right. Very good. Thank you. I don't know if people are going to recognize it, but obviously I got that from that song, but that was the kind of thing she would say.
Oh, yeah.
That's like that 60s song, that Age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Jones,
that is it.
Yeah. We're just old. He's not as old as we are.
Slightly less old.
Less old. I like that. You're less, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm less young. I prefer that. Anyway,
I just say I'm old. I'm old.
My dad became a Christian when I was 11, and the change was just, it was what it's supposed to be. It was night and day. No longer womanizing, no longer just out drinking nonstop, no longer gambling away. He was a superintendent of a couple of school districts. And, but so anyway, and I just, I became a Christian. And for me, and this is one of the things I like to emphasize to people, when I became a Christian at almost 13, 2 days before my 13th birthday, is a Billy Graham crusade. But anyway, when I became a Christian, by the time I was a punk of a kid, porn loving, shoplifting punk of a kid with a terrible GPA. And so when I became a Christian, to me, Christianity was the pearl of great price. It was the treasure in the field. I felt like there's nothing else, and I'm all in. And so I learned to, I'm such a lousy student. I learned to read in the 8th grade on using the Good News for Modern Man Bible. And I would literally spend about 3 hours a day, every day during the summer reading the Bible. And so here we are.
That's so cool. Wow. I love those great backstories. I know Norman Geisler. I got to meet Norman Geisler on one occasion. He spoke for our commencement here at Trinity, and he talked about how he had a testimony of being a bus kid. He was there was a bus route, and he got on the bus one day, and he thought, all of this, whatever you think has happened through Norman Geisler's ministry, has happened in part because some bus worker who probably never heard of apologetics was willing to do that. But all right, so let's get into this. You are, I think, what a lot of people know you for is The Problem of Evil, right? Is that your best known thing? Is that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, my book over here, Why Does God Allow Evil? And then the book on the other side. So it's got a book on evil. And then on the other side, my book, Immortal, How the Fear of Death Drives Us and What We Can Do About it. I'm actually intend, God willing, one of these days to write a book on suffering. So I was going on a radio program. The guy says, what do you study? I said, evil, death, and suffering. And he says, well, that must be a bummer. I said, no, it's exhilarating. And I thought, he says, well, how could that be? So I started thinking, I need an analogy. And what I did is I started interviewing Navy SEALs. And I will incorporate them, God willing, into my next book, The Navy SEAls. And because I thought, well, these guys know they're going to be tortured. I mean, they literally call it torture. And I thought, yet they do it anyway. And
those guys those guys. I've seen some of that on television. Like they do aren't they the ones that do Hell Week and things like that?
Well, yes. And they do the thing, they call them surf tortures, where they lock elbows and they all lie down in a row, and the surf pounds over the top of their faces and over their bodies. And the instructor will say, you're going to lie here until 3 of you drop. And wow. I mean, but they do it anyway. They know this. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty stupid person if you didn't know what you were going to get into when you decided to join the SEALs. But my point is that they go through all this suffering, and actually now how this relates to the problem of evil is there's two things in interviewing these SEALs that I found. One, they had a terrible fear of failure, and two, they kept their eyes on the prize. And that to me is the whole Christian life. We've got to keep our eyes on heaven. We're commanded in 1 Peter 1:13 to set our hope fully on the grace to be given us when Jesus Christ is revealed. And obviously we sure don't, we don't want to be judged and condemned either. So keeping your eye on the big picture is what stabilizes you as a Christian.
Well,
and actually,
that seems to be like the next thing for you anyway, is suffering, because our Trinity students are familiar with your "Why Does God Allow Evil" book, because they read it in our problem. It's one of our assigned texts. So there's a combo meal in my future that you're going to buy for the royalties. So I'm just kidding.
All right. So quick disclaimer for atheists who watch this. Number one, he grew up initially in a atheist household. So you can just skip over the usual, oh, he was raised as X, therefore that's the only reason he is X. So let's just, suspend that talking point, folks. And then we got Jackson Rowe making a good comment. He says, looks kind of like a bearded Norm MacDonald. I would agree. There's definitely some of that going on. But then one of the other very common talking points that we hear from atheists on YouTube is, oh, whoever you're talking to who's issuing airing opinion or making an argument isn't an expert in X. Therefore, they don't know what they're talking about. Therefore, I can just suspend any semblance of credibility in relation to their opinion. So in case you missed it, Dr. Jones has literally written books and has a bunch of papers, and is, his work is used as Pritch is talking about, like, well, we literally use your book in one of our classes when we're discussing things like the problem of evil. So in this context, if you want to just dismiss, on the surface, the things are going to be discussed between all these gentlemen here going forward, the guy literally wrote books on the topic. So you can't just toss out everything that he's saying in this on this topic. Let's continue.
But
an In-N-Out burger.
But I don't know how much you discuss this publicly, but I do recall in our lectures, you have in your own personal life experienced pretty intense suffering of yourself. So, and your family. And so, and I remember talking about that. And I know that a lot of people think about the philosophical problem of evil, and that occupies some of their intellectual life. But I found that the problem of suffering and how to handle that even within the church seems to be what people deal with most. You die once, but suffering we encounter it so much that seems to be a lot of people's issue, more so than the idea of evil. It's their own suffering. So
now, real quick, folks, make sure you are paying attention to what Dr. Jones is about to talk about his own life. And again, what you're about to hear from him kind of takes away that whole, oh, well, they just don't know what they're talking about, or they haven't been through, whatever the scenario is. Therefore, they don't actually know. They don't know what it's like for me. And I think he will very quickly kind of put that objection to bed quite quickly.
Yeah, and our lives, my wife and I's lives have not been easy, to say the least. We weren't able to have children. And well, if anybody has gone through that, my wife had several miscarriages. So we took in foster children. We had the police at our house 7 times in 2.5 years because we thought we could take in, we're a stable married couple. We could take in the worst of the worst. And wow, did we have but then, my wife has got, she's got a genetic thing. It's called hypermobility joint syndrome, which means that she's very, very limber, which was great in high school and in dance and in things like that. But what it means now is that her bones come out of joint pretty easily, and that's a problem. And then of course I've had bone cancer, and I write about that at length in my book. Yeah. And so I lost part of my spine to bone cancer, and I was in for the 1.5 years before they finally correctly diagnosed it. I was in increasing pain to the point where I couldn't sleep upstairs with my wife anymore, which made me very sad because I needed literally to get up every hour and walk around.
How do you function with part of your spine gone? That how does that even work? I mean, is it now at this point a major problem for mobility?
No, not at all. I lost my tailbone, the bone above that, and half the bone above that, the bone cancer. And frankly, you just don't need those bones very much. And if it was higher up, that would have been bad. And thankfully, the Lord got me to a teaching hospital with one of the best surgeons in the world on the subject. He was the director of the musculoskeletal tumor program at Cedar Sinai. But anyway, so the Lord has taken care of me. But that was valuable for me as a Christian. I am much closer to the Lord after cancer than I was before. And by the way, lying there in the hospital,
as he continues on with that, just a second, I was listening to him talk about the stuff like in hospitals, facing all these different things he went through, yeah, it definitely resonated with me in relation to the point you just made about I'm now closer to God, closer to the Lord now than I was previously. And that really speaks to me in my own life of not only was I not really close with the Lord, I was willfully off being a sinner and engaging in all sorts of materialism focused activities in life. And when I look back on all of that now, and I think about the stuff that I went through, and facing death and everything, I wouldn't go back and change it at all, because without what I went through, I never would be where I am now. I never would have gone searching for knowledge and understanding like I did. And more importantly, my recognition, realization, and appreciation for what my existence entails and how amazing our Creator ultimately is, and ultimately how my eternal existence is fascinating and makes so many of the negative things that we go through in life seem so myopic and just these minuscule little blips that in the moment they can seem overwhelming and difficult and such, but with a very, very short amount of time removal from whatever the situation is, it's like, well, yeah, again, contemplating all this from the eternal perspective, this is not really that big of a deal. And it's amazing how we so often get consumed by things if you're viewing the world through this finite period of time being the only aspect of your existence, then by default, the negative things you're going through are going to appear exponentially more insurmountable versus if you shift your frame of reference to the eternal. Let's continue.
Even though the only person there most of the time was my wife, I felt famous. And what I mean is I thought, because I told God, when I found out, when I was first diagnosed that I had bone cancer, Jeannie and I met in the hallway, and with tears streaming down our faces, I led us into a prayer of thanksgiving to God. And I knew at that moment that I'd conquered Satan in the heavenly realm.
Amen,
that I had put him to shame. Then they misdiagnosed the biopsy and said that I had a deadly bone cancer. They misdiagnosed the biopsy, and my surgeon said, "Well, if that's what you have, we're not going to take it out. We'll start you on chemo. If chemo shrinks the tumor, then we might take it out." But I'm realizing, and in fact, it was misdiagnosed as having the same cancer that took Ravi Zacharias' life. My wife and I held hands again, and we met in the hallway and held hands again. And I led us in a prayer of thanksgiving to God. And at that moment, I knew that I defeated Satan in the heavenly realms, that suffering was not going to cause me. There was no amount of suffering that was going to cause me to deny Jesus. There was no amount of suffering that was going to keep me from honoring God. Nothing. And I'm lying there in the hospital bed, and I'm catheterized. And I don't know yet which kind of my surgeon looked at the slides himself and decided that they misdiagnosed the biopsy, or they might have. He wasn't sure, so they took it out. I'm waiting there. I'm catheterized, and they pull the catheter out. And they said, "Now we're going to see if you can." I'm going to be blunt here. If you can pee, and because you might not be able to, you might be catheterized for life. And I'm just lying there going, "Oh my gosh, this is." But you know what I said? I said, "Lord, thank you. I thank you. I will take whatever comes from your hand. I am your servant." Wow. And at that moment, I felt famous because I knew that the Lord saw me. And I knew that angels saw me. And at that moment, I felt famous.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and you're a church man. What, a local church guy. So what do you, and just spitballing here, what in your mind does the church do right, and what does it do wrong in its approach to suffering in order to prepare believers to have that kind of attitude when they encounter it?
That's a really good question. I'd like to know the answer to that too. And then after that, let's jump into your theodicy, how you approach this in a more technical way. But I love this because I feel like I've just been preached to. So that's a good question that Pritchett asked.
Well, that is a great, thank you, honestly, Jonathan, for even asking that question, because I think that's so important. The number one lack in the Christian church today is any kind of robust teaching on eternity and heaven and what we have to look forward to. Satan has done what I call Extreme Makeover Metaphysical Edition, where he's made heaven look like a place you don't want to go. That you're going to be sitting on clouds, sporting flightless wings, strumming harps, and singing nonstop. None of those things are true. They're all
Baptist hymnal. You'll have the Baptist hymnal.
That's right. Well, we'll be singing old hymns. None of those things are true. In fact, I just put out a blog recently with a rather kind of a iffy title, challenging title of some, entitled "The Lord Made Orgasms Possible." And my first line is, you probably said, I think that I wrote that to shock you, and I did, to shock you out of your stupor that heaven is going to be a place you don't want to go. But my point, of course, isn't that there's going to be orgasms in heaven. My point is that.
So real quick pause here, folks. Let's think about what they're getting into right now, which is, again, ad nauseum talking points that we hear from people like Pine Creek, right? Of heaven will be so boring. I mean, I'll just get bored after a while, and I want to die. I want to be terminated. I don't want to have any more existence. And it's like, it's such a narrow-minded worldview that like you're operating from the perspective that there might not always be something new for you to experience, and that your frame of reference is not necessarily going to be linear in the current manner that we experience things. And it's like, well, what if you could be experiencing more than one thing at a time? That sounds pretty fun. What if you are, there is an ultimately infinite level of exploration to go into? That seems pretty interesting. I don't like by default, that means you're not bored. And all I gotta say is if one of your primary reasons for not wanting to conclude that a God exists is I might be bored in heaven, like that's your objection. Wow. I don't understand how atheists call themselves free thinkers when so many of them seem incapable of like grasping this very baseline concepts and then extrapolating out and like, oh, no. I remember when I was a little kid and they were like teaching me about heaven, and there was like harps and clouds, I think, and there was like some angels and some buildings and stuff. That's what heaven's like, and I don't really like that idea. That seems really, really boring if I'm just gonna be sitting around like singing songs and such. It's like, yeah, okay, bro. If that's all you can comprehend, I feel sorry for you in consideration of your eternal existence.
That the Lord is the creator of food and drink and sex. And if there's not something that we enjoy here, that we won't have there, expect better things in this place. So anyway, when the last time I just asked, if I ask your audience, when's the last time you've heard a sermon on heaven? It just doesn't occur. And it just doesn't occur.
No,
eternal life doesn't. I mean, it just doesn't occur.
I'll tell you what. This Clay. I'll tell you. I read years ago Randy Alcorn's book on heaven, which has been a favorite of a lot of people, and I think he admits that like a lot of that is speculation. But he brought out this point that you're talking about now, that we don't think enough. We think about this world. We might even think about hell, but we don't think about heaven enough. And when I was in evangelistic ministry, old school, preaching Sunday through Wednesday night at churches, and I developed a sermon because I was studying near-death experiences and things like that. And I developed a sermon on heaven that incorporated some of that. And I found that, to my surprise, that message, it was like what U2 says about Where the Streets Have No Name. If nothing else is taken off, if you do that one, it'll take off. And I realized heaven is powerful, powerful content.
Yeah, right. For the believer. In fact, I did a Back to the Bible radio interview, and he said, Nat Crawford said that the favorite interview that's ever been done on their station happened to be when I came out and talked about heaven. So, and because I think that people are desperate to have a view of heaven where they go, that might be a place I'd like to go, because you can't want to go to heaven if all you have to recommend it's better than the other place.
Yeah, right. All right. So Clay, you've asked me to call you Clay. By the way, Deflate is here, another well-known YouTuber who is a friend of the channel. Says everyone should get a copy of Clay's book. Why Does God Allow Evil? It's fantastic.
Yeah, come to Trinity and you have to read it. I don't know if lesser apologetic programs assign his book in the Problem of Evil class. I know that our apologetics program assigns it in our Problem of Evil.
All right, so Clay, so that you don't have to respond to that, let me just say this. So as we approach this issue, I don't think I'd be surprised if it wasn't the case that libertarian freedom functions in your approach to theodicy. But I'm just going to kind of hand it over to you to, if you want to, I don't feel like you've got, a lot of our audience is familiar with the basics of some of this terrain, but don't feel like you've got to reproduce your book. But what would you say to an audience like this one about how we can respond to the problem of evil as it relates to humans specifically? We'll start there, I guess.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Lord wanted to create created creatures with free will. We can't imagine creatures not having free will. I mean, my toaster doesn't have free will. In fact, I think I threw out my toaster because we don't make toast anymore. But anyway, my microwave doesn't have free will either. I mean, we want to be with creatures that have free will. These free creatures now, this is pre-Adam and Eve, somewhere. And who knows, could have been hundreds of millions or billions of years ago. Some creatures rebelled. Satan rebelled. He got a lot of other creatures, not people, but he got a lot of other creatures to join him. I think then that the Lord created earth partially to respond to the heavenly problem of evil. So there's been a heavenly problem of evil. And what is it? Why did Satan rebel? Why does anybody rebel? We're not getting our fair share. We should be getting more than we are. It's a problem of evil. God's not good, certainly, and I think so. Anyway, so Satan rebels. I think God probably. I think scripturally it's supportable to say that God partially, anyway, created earth to answer the heavenly problem of evil. Because you'll notice in Revelation chapter 12, when Jesus died on the cross, then the accuser of the brethren was cast down. Before Jesus died on the cross, G.K. Beale in his fabulous commentary on Revelation, it's 1,200 pages long, although he has a shortened version. But anyway, in his commentary on Revelation, he says until Jesus died on the cross, Satan had a point. And that's an amazing thing. But Satan did have a point until Jesus died on the cross. And the point was, nobody can keep your standards. Nobody can. Everybody's a failure. And yet you're going to let some of these folks in when they can't keep your standards. See, Satan, I think that's true. I think Satan had a point. And it wasn't until Jesus died on the cross that Satan no longer had a point. and now the accuser of the brethren can't accuse the brethren because somebody just kept the law perfectly in every way, and proved even to his own torturous death on the cross. He honored God through it, and it defeated Satan in the heavenly realms. And now, and by the way, it says at the end of the book of Romans, is that God is going to crush Satan under your feet. In other words, we are also joining Jesus in being the serpent crusher. And as you and I then.
So one of the things that really struck me about the points he's making there are, again, things we hear all the time from atheists, like, why would God allow X? Why did God do Y? Why didn't he do the X? And it's like, well, it seems that there might have been some logic. And again, if you continue to listen and don't run away, you'll see a much more culmination of the logic flow that he's beginning to outline here, and how it ultimately correlates with the allowance of the negative and evil, and how it all correlates with free will as well. But just stay tuned. And atheists, I know that you're not going to want to make it through all of this, but it's going to be worth it if you will just sit down and pay attention long enough. And, Gurmania is in the house. Gur was one of the individuals over on Pudding Brain and the Gang's channel that were talking about Pine Creek and his little stuff, and talking about needing to unpack this. I think Gurmania might have been the one talking about unpacking this. Well, Gurmania, the unpacking is happening beyond the 30 seconds that you guys watched of the taken out of context, as Pine Creek usually does, and trying to put things into, hilarity for small-minded, closed-minded atheists to claim to have somehow analyzed and unpacked without actually looking at the surrounding context.
Pretty good. God, as you and I then honor God through suffering, we participate in crushing Satan under our feet. Take a look at the end of Romans 16. And so anyway, so in a nutshell, I think that the Lord did an awful lot of what he's done here on planet Earth for the specific purpose of showing the goodness, how good he is. If Adam hadn't have sinned, then Jesus wouldn't have needed to die on the cross for our sins, and we wouldn't have seen the amazing love of God. And
so there are goods. You're kind of hitting on that notion that there are goods that only come about in a world where there is some level of suffering and pain or evil.
Yeah, and I want to make 2 quick points of that to all the budding apologists that watch our program. One, you can talk about Bible-y stuff.
Yeah.
Right. When we're talking about the problem of evil, when unbelievers bring it's
an internal criticism.
Yeah, you can say more than simply trying to have a philosophical answer to a philosophical problem. And I think that a lot of apologists who deal with this don't deal with it in this way, where you actually have a Christian answer.
Yeah, you're giving it's consistent. And I don't mean to break your flow, Clay, but I mentioned this not too long ago, that the importance of understanding what the rules are, like with an internal criticism. When someone wants to challenge something God does in Scripture, something, they're assuming the trappings of Scripture, the doctrines, and all that sort of thing. And it'd be kind of like the difference between if we wanted to criticize the Fellowship of the Ring from the Lord of the Rings internally by saying, well, why didn't they just get on the big eagles and fly all the way to Mordor? I know all the answers. Please don't spam me with the answers. But that's a fair question. Whereas, well, why are they going to Mordor anyway? It's fake. Yeah. That's not taking into account the internal criticism.
Yeah, the second comment was about the G.K. Bill line about Satan having a point until the cross, which satisfies.
That's a cool point. I like that.
Yeah. Sometimes though, I can hear fundamentalists not even thinking that you could ever utter such a line, and
I think it does throw people at first through, absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm agreeing with it. But I'm just saying that it's okay to point that out, because what it does is it illustrates that it just points back to the gospel that only Jesus, the God-man, could satisfy the payment for sin as a man and be the offended party as God, and that's the only way it could be. That's just the logic of Christianity. So it's not quite as shocking as people might have heard it.
Right. I think that God, the Lord, resolved to a large extent the heavenly problem of evil on earth with Jesus' death on the cross, and he's going to finish that up at the second coming, of course. Yeah.
And now that is a now. Okay, I was hoping we'd get something mind blowing, and that is kind of mind blowing. Yeah. I mean, to the Christian audience, I think it could be, and that is the notion that it wasn't until the cross that the initial angelic problem of evil was actually resolved. That you don't think about.
Well, the angelic or the demonic complaint or the satanic complaint.
Like they had a thing.
But it almost. But is it fair to say then that the cross is not just our answer for the dilemma of being sin, but it's almost as if it's God's answer to, of course,
everything.
The powers and principalities that were disarmed at the cross. I mean, you go to Colossians for that. But it's almost as if you could read that as saying that the cross was necessary for God to own up the fact that there's evil. I mean,
it accomplishes so much. Again, the immense love of God to allow his son. I mean, we always see this, loincloth on Jesus for obvious reasons. There was no loincloth. He's hanging there naked. You're pooping and peeing. Anybody that's crucified, you're doing this for hours. It's humiliating. But this demonstrates the immense love of God for us. And like I say, his being willing to do this thwarts Satan And I think that's just amazing that now we, you know, I mean, and so again, Revelation 12, and the accuser of the brethren is cast down because he can't accuse.
One of the things I always find interesting about, you know, that we hear ad nauseum from the atheists, and this will happen. It's already heard it earlier. It will happen again, and in every additional stream about this, there will always comes up by some smart aleck atheist. What kind of a horrible, twisted, you know, evil person would sacrifice their child? Oh, I think one of the ones I heard earlier was something to the effect of, oh, your neighbor is going to kill their kid. Would you view that person as normal and rational? Like that stuff. It's like, okay, let's just contemplate this for just one moment. Of obviously, in the context of Jesus being God as well, it's a smidge different than, you know, sacrificing your own kid for something different. Number one. Number two, there's an entirely different context in relation to the frame of reference. So number one, yes, the suffering, the death is going to take place. However, from God's point of view, it is not it's not an eternal outcome. So it's not like you're not knowing what's happening. Number one. Now, number three, in this logic flow here, is the sacrifice of your child for something is not justified in the context of which Christ is being offered up, right? But Christ is being offered up as the only option, the only thing that can satisfy the weight that must be accounted for. There is no other option. And in the context of your kid, well, what are we doing? We're supposed to be protecting, right? We are the ones, they're dependent upon us versus the other way around, right? In this context, Christ, we are actually the infants. We are actually the things that are in need of a savior, that have no other way to save themselves. This is the whole point. And why this goes over the YouTube atheist head, it just blows me away every time. Like, this is such a very basic concept that should not be that difficult to comprehend. And yet it gets regurgitated over and over and over again, and will be in response to all of this in an ongoing aspect.
Anymore. It's been done.
Yeah, it's the ultimate answer to the problem of evil, because sometimes Christians can give greater good arguments that, well, there's evil because greater goods come out, but we forget that that's the greatest good that came out of evil.
Let me just say something. You know, atheists have given up, largely, almost entirely given up the logical problem of evil, where you're showing if God is all good, he desired to prevent evil. If he's all powerful, he'd be able to do what he desires, but evil exists. They've given that up because Planting Gun, among others, has shown that what you'd have to do for the logical problem of evil to succeed is you'd have to show that for any given instance of evil, that it would be logically impossible for God to have a sufficiently moral reason to allow it. And so they're done with that. So now it's just, okay, but we see all this evil.
Dr. Jones, I hate to break it to you, but they're only done with it in academia. The internet atheists have still not grasped this. It's still being spewed over and over. They do videos about this all the time. Every debate, every interaction, this whole everything that you're saying, oh yeah, that's already been addressed in academia. The logical arguments have been, you know, put forth. Plantinga has done made the case. Many philosophers have made this case and have kind of put down the standard talking points that you're referring to. But that's only for like the educated people, I guess. The internet atheists continue to claim that this stuff has not been accounted for, and therefore God does not exist, because if he did exist, none of this would get accounted for, and there's no rational conclusion as to why this could be accounted for. Therefore, if you're a theist, you're not actually thinking clearly, because if you were, you would recognize that there's no way that your God can exist because of this problem. Well, again, refusing to look at the fact that it's actually been addressed. No other way, whether or not you want to accept the end conclusion that God would exist doesn't mean that the arguments that you're making haven't been addressed
in the world and what's going on here. And I think that all of this evil that we're experiencing in the world is one, it's teaching us that sin is, it's teaching us the horror of rebellion against God. And when somebody comes to me and they go, well, you're giving the Christian perspective. Look. And this is what Jonathan's bringing up. If you come to me and ask me why God allows evil, well, I'm a Christian and I'm going to give the Bible's answer to why God allows evil. I'm not going to talk about this, these concepts of a perfect, it's not perfectly, but anyway, this perfect.
No,
being,
I know what you mean.
like,
where God becomes more like this. Well, that's the problem, right? What do you label that? Right?
Yeah, it's like, the greatest conceivable being. Look,
right.
Forget that. I'm defending the God of the Bible. I'm not interested in defending what some concept of God is out there. I couldn't care less about that. You ask me why the God that I worship allows evil, because that's the issue. I'm not interested. And if atheists, as John Feinberg points out, he says, if atheists say, well, I don't like that God, I don't care, because I'm not defending a God that you would worship, because a God that you would worship doesn't exist. I'm defending the God.
Now, the point he's making there would also necessitate the atheists doing an internal critique, not their like crazy schizophrenic bounce back and forth between internal, external, straw man, steel man, mental problems, and actually extrapolate out the logic more than one or two steps before falling off the wagon and not being able to like follow things to the end. Conclusions that he's talking about here. And obviously the point he's making, hey, no, I'm arguing for X. You can't just circumvent everything and then be like, well, X is false because things that you're not arguing, I argued, even though it has my arguments have nothing to do with your arguments. Your argument is false because my arguments that don't have any relevance, I said them. Therefore, you're wrong. And I didn't actually listen to what you said, nor did I address what you argued, but you're wrong. It's like, this is what happens in Clubhouse, YouTube, and Facebook conversations. It's really amazing to me how this keeps going, and then nobody wants to address it.
God of the Bible.
So that's good. So in looking at this, then back to the issue of logical versus evidential arguments from evil. The way I say it, let's see if you think this is fair. I think that the logical argument from evil is making a stronger claim, but is more easily responded to, because all you have to have is a defeater, as you say. Any possible explanation, even if we don't know it's the right one, that could be true. Whereas with the evidential argument, we've got to really dig in here and do some work, because it's probabilistic. It's not saying necessarily in that slam dunk deductive, therefore sort of sense. So, but do you answer those differently, or do you think that just presenting the Christian
I have never
theological...
had any. Well, when it comes to the logical problem, I haven't had anybody argue that with me for decades. Yeah. I think they've realized that's been put to bed by planting and others. That's been put to bed. Mm-hmm. The evidential problem of evil. My short answer to why God allows all this evil is because He's allowing us to understand the horror of rebellion against Him. This is where it leads. And as one of my lines is, everyone is going to watch everyone they know die from murder, accident, or disease. And the only thing that will prevent that is their own death from murder, accident, or disease. And when I'm telling an audience that, I always go, so have a nice day. But this is now, here's where I'm going with all of this. This is eternally valuable knowledge. That understanding the horror of rebellion and seeing the horror of sin is eternally valuable knowledge, because, as I said, I think we're going to have libertarian free will in heaven and not sin. And one of the reasons we're going to have not sin is because we are accumulating this eternally valuable knowledge. And the judgment, people go, well, what about those that didn't live very long or whatever? The judgment is going to give us a lot more, where we're really going to see what happened. And by the way, if there's about 7 billion people on earth, and there's about 7 billion people that have been alive before now, that's 14 billion people. If each person's judgment lasted 10 minutes, that's 266,000 years. Now, I don't know how long the judgment's going to be. That's not the point. The point is that the judgment's going to be a significant event, and it's going to be quite an education. And I think that's another part of the reason that we're going to go, sin's dumb. It's just, I did that sin thing. When I was
he's about to expand on that point here, and the concept he's really putting forth here, he's going to expand on it here in just a moment, is the aspect of growing up and not being a juvenile idiot. And like, to me, so many of the positions that are put forth by atheists about this topic right now necessitate being in a perpetual like juvenile state of mind. Like, oh, I could never grow up, and then be like, I'm never doing X again. Like, we do that all the time. Like, I'm not going to, I think he uses this example, like, I'm not going to go try to electrocute myself on purpose. Like, I'm never going to do that, ever. Thankfully, I never electrocuted myself as a kid, but I'm never going to do it as an adult. There is no way, shape, form, or fashion I am ever going to go and stick a fork in the wall socket. It will never happen. I will never do that. Just, I mean, I don't really understand how, and again, this is what Dr. Jones is making the point of. Like, if we have observed all these things, all the ramifications, the negatives, and how there is not a positive outcome, and you equate it to something as dumb as electrocuting yourself with a fork, and then be like, well, how could you ever still have free will in heaven and then not sin? Well, if it's the same thing and you're no longer a child mentally, it's not that complicated. But somehow it's something that doesn't really seem to compute with the vast majority of YouTube atheists.
Young person, like I became a Christian, as I said, at 12, 13 years, no, almost 13. And when early Christian, now this is the thinking of a 14-year-old boy, I thought, so I can't have sex. Not that there were any girls lining up when I was 14, because there weren't. But I thought, so I can't have sex. And this is my theology, because, man, I'd go to hell if I had sex. And I couldn't understand, because sex just to me as a 14-year-old just looked like this has got to be a lot of fun. Why is God not doing this? I don't get it. I can tell you now, having been, well, Jeannie and I just celebrated 50 years together. We started going out 2 months after I turned 15. But so we just celebrated 50 years of being together. Wow. But I can tell you now, after seeing how many people have been damaged by affairs and adultery and promiscuity, how it's damaged them. See, now it's not just that I see that the Bible says don't do it. Now I see he's a very good reason for saying don't do it.
Right.
And so
our culture is short-sighted. There was a recent article that was talking about people postponing marriage and all of that, and because they were scared to get married in their 20s. But it had said that couples who marry in their 20s who did not cohabitate prior to getting married have a significantly higher chance of remaining married as opposed to couples who do cohabitate.
Well, I'd like to ask you a question about this, because just a methodological question, because I teach one of our Problem of Evil courses here at Trinity, so I'm trying to learn here, talking with you and take advantage of that. So you took a dog leg there that I didn't expect you to take, and that is, so we're trotting along, and I'm making all the same moves you're making, and then you do this really interesting, and I see the utility in it. You make this interesting move where I make a different move. What I would typically do at this juncture, where we're talking about, God, when we're talking about free will, we're talking about God wanting to create beings that could love each other and love the Lord your God, love your neighbors yourself. And one could argue the highest expression of that is free love, freely given love, and freely exchanged love. And that's how I typically go. Although I think a criticism of that is God eternally existing as the Trinity. What you have to get into his free will and what all that is like. But it sounds like, well, it looks like from your facial expressions, you would agree with that. You go a different way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said I do agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So, but you go a different way, and you do this eternally valuable knowledge, and that not only gets you there too, but also leads you right into the free will in heaven thing. Because I'm trying to understand the thing here, because the judgment actually becomes the university for sin, basically everything that's wrong with sin, about sin, and how destructive and how it's destroyed people's life. Have I got that all correct? Did I characterize that right?
Yeah, I think that if we're going to have libertarian free will in heaven, which obviously is my contention, we're going to have libertarian free will, significant libertarian free will in heaven. How is it going to be that we're not going to sin in heaven? And so I actually have a bunch of reasons. There will be no more world. We're not going to be one click from porn in heaven. There's not going to be lots of little opportunities to sin. There will be no more devil, and the devil's going to be in hell. We won't have a body like we have now. It just wants things. Your body's not that discriminating on your body. I'm not talking about your mind, but your body isn't that discriminating. It doesn't care necessarily where it gets its sexual release. Your mind may care, but we're not going to have a body like we do now. And then, of course, we're learning lessons here, and we'll learn further lessons at the judgment about this. And I think also hell will be an eternal reminder to free creatures of the horror of rebellion. And so, in other words, I've got a number of reasons why. But I think the biggest reason why all the evil and suffering that we're enduring in this world is going on, the biggest reason is because God is showing us the horror of rebellion against him. And so I like to use I use the analogy all the time. I say, would you, Jonathan's probably seen this. I'll say, would you like to see me jab this pen into my eye? And I hold the pen. I could just jab it right in there. And nobody, once in a while, there's been a wise guy. Yeah, go ahead. But that doesn't really happen. But anyway, I could jab a pen into my eye. I could, but I'm not going to. And the reason I'm not going to is I'm too smart for that.
Yeah. Right. That's kind of always been my answer when people talk about free will but no sin. I've always told people I think that it will definitely be logically possible that someone could sin in heaven. It's just never going to happen. So it's not,
It's not right. It's like now, but we don't give pens to babies, do we? Why not? They jab it right in their eye. J.P. Moreland, who's always more indelicate than I like saying that. J.P. Moreland uses the example. He says, how many of you, he's talking to an audience, how many of you want to get a spoon and let's go out into the lawn and chow down on a steaming pile of dog poop? Nobody, no takers on that one for sure. But notice you don't let little crawly babies out next to dog poop. Why not? They crawl right into it. They don't know better.
Yeah.
And so what? And by the way, I got the pen analogy from Dallas Willard, the philosopher of USC.
It's a good one.
It is a good one. I like it. Anyway, we're learning here that sin is stupid, and that's an eternally valuable lesson.
Yeah, we learned.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me how, and it's what I'm about to say applies on both sides of the argument, but it's really striking how so many atheists want to act like we're just so enlightened and none of these things that we're talking about right now could possibly be things we don't yet comprehend or are just beginning to comprehend. And it's like, no, we know everything about this. We admit that we don't know, how we exist, but we'll figure that out at some point. But at the same time, no, we understand everything about existence from the metaphysical perspective, philosophical perspective. Like, no, we understand all of that, but we agree that we don't know how we exist, but we're going to figure that out at some point. But no, if you disagree with my position, then you're just wrong. And it's it kind of cracks me up on this stuff. And then the same thing in relation to, why did God give us, bodies like this? Why would a creator do X? And in terms of what we're observing, right? And it's like, well, and like, why would we be parents? And to me, a lot of the standard talking points we hear from the atheists on YouTube, especially, to me, it's like, if you've been a parent and you've observed your kid transform from infant on up and observed them, turn into a little person and develop all their own skills and frame of reference and understanding and knowledge and create experiences and all those different things. And then you still operate from this perspective that, why would any God let X happen? It's like, okay, so should I lock my daughter in the basement and never let her out? Because if I do let her out and something happens to her, therefore that means I'm a bad parent for letting her have a life. Like, that's just so dumb. I don't understand how people operate from that position when, again, if you are the eternal parent and you know that even if they die in this world, that is not the end of them. And in fact, they could be ending up in a better place, a higher plane of existence than here. And actually keeping them here locked into this plane would be the equivalent of locking them in the basement and not letting them move on and expand into the next plane of their own frame of reference. Like, I don't understand why atheists have such a hard time comprehending this. It's really amazing to me.
Here, but I don't think we learn well enough, obviously, because we continue in it sometimes. But one of the things that you've got me thinking about is we could actually do a better job learning here, but we don't know how much we're learning until we're on the other side of it. Because I think on the other side of this, where you're talking about death and then judgment and then the presence of God, glorified body, all of that, on the other side of that, I think we're going to realize how much more that we did learn through this than we are learning as we go now.
And like I say, if you missed any lessons, the judgment could be a couple 100,000 years long or longer. So if you missed any lessons, I think that's going to make up for anything that you missed.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, that was bad. And so I think that, there's more lessons to be learned here. So you don't need purgatory. I like Jerry Walls, and he's a friend of mine, but I don't think, I came at it at a different. He actually says, I think purgatory has its place. I said, what if there's a 500,000 year judgment? We probably are going to learn what we need to know during that time.
But that's still, in light of everlasting life, even 500,000 years of judgments. That's
well, I think people sometimes when I say that, they go, wow, that would be a long time. And my reply is, do you have some place you're going to need to be?
Right. Right. They're just thinking of standing in line at Disney World for 3,000 years.
It's just long enough you're ready to move on now and never go back to that slot. That's what it is.
And not only that, but we're going to judge. We Christians, you and us, are going to judge the world. And the scripture says in 1 Corinthians 6:2-3, we're going to judge the world and we're going to judge angels. So we're not just passive. We're not just viewing it. We're participating in judging men and angels. So we're not just going, oh, wow, there goes another one.
Yeah, well, in addition to heaven, you don't hear that discussed a whole lot either. Our role in that.
No. Well, you don't. People read that passage and they don't know what to do with it. I frankly do, and I talk about it in my book, Why Does God Allow Evil? But anyway, I think that we're going to judge the world. And we're going to judge angels. And real quick, just since it's there, the reason for that is that creatures who have seeing the evidence, we believe the evidence for Christianity is sufficient to believe. My argument, I didn't make this up, this doesn't come from me, but God gives enough evidence of his existence and love and who he is so that those who want to believe will have their beliefs justified, but not so much evidence that those who don't want to believe will be forced to feign loyalty. Yeah. And so I think that's, so as we Christians endure suffering and endure temptation and honor God through it, that puts us in a rightful place to judge those who saw the same evidence and said, it's not enough. Because we're going to say, I looked at the same evidence you did, and guess what? It is enough, and your judgment is deserved.
Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, what a point that was just made there by Dr. Jones. And how does that just skewer, impale, and slice and dice one of the standard things that we hear over and over and over again. God knows what would make me believe. If God was real, why isn't there enough evidence for me to grasp this? So on and so forth. How could God judge me if there's not enough evidence for me to conclude that he exists? So on and so forth. And it's a very interesting point. Well, it's like, well, there's actually a lot of people who, and then you could argue that the majority of people are operating from the perspective that there is a God. Now, before you even getting into the designation of like which God are we talking about and stuff, the majority of humanity throughout history has believed that there is a God, that a God or gods exist, period. And that whole point about that Clay Jones made about the judgment aspect, I thought it was very striking. It really was. I was able to figure it out. Why were you not? You claim there is no evidence. I argue that there is. And you have people like, let's see, Aaron Ra. This, by the way, is another video I'll be reviewing soon. So Aaron Ra, by the way, folks, has come out as a Satanist at the recent first Satan Con in Arizona, where he was a keynote speaker, I guess, and came out as a Satanist. So that was pretty funny. But one of the points I watched the whole his whole speech earlier today, and it was kind of funny. One of the points he made was that apologists are the biggest liars. And it's like, interesting. So you claim that none of the arguments that are made by apologists actually have substance, that they're full of lies and not actually attempts to convince you that theism is true, God exists, etc. Kind of seems fascinating to me that you're now proclaiming yourself as a Satanist, but you admitted that you were hiding that point for quite some time, and you didn't want to make it public that you were actually a Satanist, while running around talking about how theism is, madness and stupidity and lies and con men propagating, BS and snake oil salesmen, while you just admitted that you were hiding the fact that you were a Satanist. It's like, man, do you not recognize the contradiction of that? It's kind of interesting, but anyway, let's continue.
Well, okay, so briefly, if you want to, I mean, you don't have to be brief, but I'm trying to be respectful of your time. Animal suffering has become real big right now. One of the internet's biggest atheist voices, Cosmic Skeptic, Alex O'Connor, is a vegan and has been out very, very outspoken on this and animal treatment, and that has created, I think, ripples. Obviously, people have been talking about this for a while, but it's become popular in that realm. So, how do we make sense of this sort of thing, and like caterpillars that get wasp eggs laid in and they burrow out, and it sounds like something Wes Craven came up with? What do we do about all this?
Well, of course, that's what we call, that's all falls into the category of what's known as gratuitous suffering or pointless suffering. And it's the same thing for children, because you go, well, this is just a baby. Why has this baby got cancer? And there's several things that I have to say about that. First of all of this suffering to a certain extent came into the world because.
I wonder if Germania is still here, because babies with cancer is one of his favorite little jabs he likes to use. It's very common on the internet, but I'm actually pretty sure that today, over on Pudding Brain in the Gang's channel, Germania himself was actually talking about God allowing kids to have cancer. It's amazing how people think that never gets addressed. And it's just, there's no way to understand how God could ever allow anything bad to happen to babies.
Because Adam and Eve sinned. Then God cursed the ground. And when God cursed, what kind of pestilence, what kind of disease could not have come forth from God looking at planet Earth and saying, I curse you? And so God curses the earth. And we know Romans 8, it talks about that the earth is, all of creation is under bondage, waiting for the glorious revelation of the sons of God. But when did it get under bondage? Well, when God cursed the earth. And so that's where it started. But so then the question is, so we're seeing death and destruction around us. And I'm going to use this phrase again. That's eternally valuable knowledge, because this all started because of human sinfulness. But the question I like to push on skeptics regarding this is, how would God do that? how would God keep all the animals in the world from suffering? Exactly. Now, what's the mechanism that he does that? Does he put a force field over, like somebody starts a fire? Does he put a force field over all?
It's a video game, Clay. It's a video game.
That's right. There it is.
Well,
I mean, how does he prevent that without making his presence too known? People say, the same thing with children. How does God keep all children from being injured at all times? How does he accomplish?
And real quick, folks, what they're kind of crossing over into now is the divine hiddenness problem that is also a favorite talking point of YouTube atheists, and correlates as well with the, why is God not proving to me that he exists and showing me, why doesn't he come? And, I think Jackson Rowe wants the Book of Mark or something written in the stars or in the fabric of space. Once all these things done, if that happens, then I will believe. And so pay close attention to what Clay is talking about here.
Accomplish that without making his presence unmistakably known. I mean, where everybody went, of course there's a God. Children can't be hurt.
But now on that point, Clay, on that point, I know that my atheist audience is going to be like, right. And I know you just said something about divine hiddenness a minute ago, but come on, man, if heaven and hell's on the line, especially if the traditional view of hell is correct, let him make his presence known.
Yeah, well, the trouble is, as C.S. Lewis says, that completely obliterates free will. C.S. Lewis said it when he says the truth of Christianity cannot be like a multiplication table where we would have no possible opportunity but to accept it. That the Lord simply doesn't want that, because that isn't real freedom. That the Lord is actually interested in us having real freedom. And so, like I say, he gives enough evidence so that those who want to believe will have their beliefs justified, but not so much that those who don't want to believe will be forced to think loyalty.
I really don't understand how what he just said there is so difficult for atheists to understand. I mean, the other day, over on Clubhouse, I got into this. There was a conversation that was going on for like 45 minutes. I finally hopped in. They've been going round and round in circles about free will, limited free will, all this kind of stuff. And this guy kept arguing that you could have free will if you only could choose A. It's like, okay, if you don't have A and not A to choose from, then you don't have the functional capacity to choose not A, because your ability in this context to function is free will. If you don't have free will to choose something other than A, then you don't have free will. Therefore, you can't choose not A. And it's like you have to have the ability to choose either or. Otherwise, you have no choice. Otherwise, you have no free will. And this is like I don't understand why people have such a hard time grasping this concept. This is so simple. And I really there's no way so many of the atheists that I hear and I've had conversations with to like go down this rabbit hole and argue this, in the extreme. They can't actually be this dumb, because this is not that difficult of a concept to comprehend. This has to be willful suspension of rational thought and desperation to avoid the end conclusion, right? It's just like Jeffrey Williams, who I debated over on S.J. Thomason's channel 4 or 5 months ago, when we were debating about the genetic code. And he concedes that if it is a code, then it would require a coder. But then, in spite of all of the aspects that it is a code, desperately clings to it just being a metaphor, even though there's paper after paper talking about how it's not a metaphor, how it is actually code, because he's recognized that if it is this, then Y must follow. And it really, really amazes me. Let's continue.
For instance, let's suppose that the Lord made the universe such that we could kind of look up through the ceiling and we went, whoa, there's a giant flaming sword. And if anybody disobeyed God, he immediately cut them in half. How many people would call themselves Christians in such a world? All of them.
Most of us, yeah.
How many people would be worshipers in that world? None of them. I don't think you get a worshiper in such a world.
And that's a fair point, because Clay, when I debated Matt Dillahunty, I looked up all his stuff and tried to see what his thinking was. And he would often say that if he became convinced that the God of the Bible was real, he would believe intellectually in terms of mental assent, but he would not worship this God. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then the divine hiddenness thing rings hollow a bit, doesn't it?
Well, well, then the judgment comes for you. See, I'm getting more and more, the judgment comes for you, because they don't like God. I don't believe anyone ever rejects Christianity when it's being properly presented. I don't believe that anyone ever rejects the properly presented gospel for purely intellectual reasons. I don't think that ever occurs. And now atheists are going, oh no, that's not true. I have well, at the judgment, that'll all be exposed, and we're going to see. Because frankly, I don't think they want to submit their lives to God, and so they're just making up excuses. And I mean, like for instance, the hallucination theory. Well, I know this is off topic, just one more sentence about it. It's that the disciples had mass hallucinations of Jesus' resurrection, basically, is ridiculous. But I don't want to believe that the universe popped into existence out of nothing, uncaused. That's dumb. That first life, atheist Fred Hoyle was the one who came up with this, that first life evolved by chance. He said is equivalent to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a 747. That was said by an atheist physicist, Fred Hoyle. That wasn't said by Richard Dawkins, by the way, quotes that in his book, The God Delusion, and he agrees with Fred Hoyle. And so I like to point to these things and say, so the universe popped into existence out of nothing, uncaused. First life assembled itself by complete accident, and all these people had hallucinations, and you're going, oh, there's not enough evidence for Christianity. No, you are wicked, and you don't want Christianity to be true. That's the real issue.
We can see where you get it, Pritchett.
Yeah, well, that's why I say that. Yeah, and going back to the divine hiddenness thing, it's not like God. Even when God does what people ask, okay, parts of sea. How long before they're building a golden calf, right? Jesus performs miracles. They still reject. It doesn't matter. I mean, so like you said, I like that line about enough to know, but not so much to feign allegiance, because that's really what you would get. But we saw some of that happening within the biblical narrative too.
I just wrote an article on that. It's published in the latest edition of the Christian Research Journal, entitled "The 4 Types of Divine Hiddenness." And the thing about, because people say, well, how could Israel, and I had a famous apologist, I won't mention his name, ask me that question. Say, I don't understand. God obviously showed his power much more than he did then than he does now. Well, there's 4 major types of divine hiddenness. The first is there a God at all? Well, there wouldn't have been any Egyptians or Israelites in Egypt that didn't believe there was a God. That wasn't even a question. Everybody believed there was a God. There's no evidence that there was any such thing as an atheist during that time. The second type, though, is who is this God? And that's why the Lord needed to have a continuity. So he has a continuity from the miracles occurring in Egypt, but he needs to have the pillar of cloud and fire taking them out, so they don't go. So that when he does miracles later, they don't go, this is a different God, because that's what constantly happened in the Old Testament. So is there a God? Which God is the true God? So he has to do that. But then is this God good? And that's another type of divine hiddenness. And the Lord was constantly bringing them into places where there wasn't enough food, there wasn't necessarily drinkable water. They thought they were going to starve. Now, see, that's challenging them regarding whether this God is good. Moses leaves them for 40 days. They make a calf, for crying out loud, because they go, we don't know where this man Moses went, so we'll make our own God. This is the God that delivered you out of Egypt. So there's four major types of divine hiddenness. And so, but in today, the big issue is there a God at all? And then, of course, which God is the true God? Is Christianity true? But and problem of evil is God good or powerful?
Well, and the point you just made there about is there a God and which God is true, I agree with him completely. And you got obviously classic apologetics, and starting with let's first argue whether or not it's more reasonable to conclude that a God exists, and then from there delineate down and determine which one would be correct. And to me, what I find so interesting in so many of these debates, conversations, different channels, clubhouse rooms, all that kind of stuff, it's an ongoing, yeah. I know you're arguing for God right now, but let's just skip all that and go to, why the Christian God isn't true. And it's like, okay, and then you ask the follow-up question. So do you think that any gods exist? No. So why would I continue to go and argue down for my specific religion if you don't even want to concede that it is a remotely plausible conclusion and explanation for our existence that any higher power exists and would be necessary for our existence? Like, what's the point? You have zero. You're just gonna try and pull a godless engineer and be all mythicist and such, and well, we don't even know if Jesus actually existed, and therefore the Christian God is false because I decided that there's no way somebody could have risen from the dead because naturalism says that couldn't happen, therefore everything about your God is false. It's like, but you don't even want to concede that a God exists. So how can we possibly have an internal critique if you don't even want to accept that any God could possibly exist? Like it's impossible to even have that extrapolation out of logic, and yet you're claiming to be rational in your end conclusion. It's amazing how people don't think about that.
Yeah. Well, the free will defense, one of the pushbacks I always get, and of course you're saying, does God create a cartoon world where he protects animals, protects nature, and all that kind of stuff, or not? Explain how he does it. I've always told people that, actually the free will defense answers the natural problem of evil as well, or the problem of evil in nature, because even if I don't care what anyone believes about global warming, if you agree that it's logically possible, at least, or you consider that it is very likely that our human behavior and actions contribute to damaging the environment, then you have no objection to human free will and behavior impacting nature.
Yeah. Okay. So, I want to do. Can we do some questions? Are you okay with doing some questions?
Well, that was a question, and so
that is a question. I have another question.
So yes.
Okay. First of all, Chris State is here, and he gave us $5. Thank you, Chris. Love Chris, and he actually is one of the questioners. We're going to get to his, but first, I want to know. I have a dog named Indiana. That's how big of a fan I am of the Indiana Jones franchise, because he was named after the dog, Indiana. So, is Indiana going to be with me forever?
I don't know. Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know.
Good answer.
I don't know.
I'm asking the questions everybody wants.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I think that, by the way, I think it's possible that all the animals pre-fall talk. Lewis obviously went that way, that they all spoke. I think it's possible. Take Balaam's donkey, by the way. Balaam's, it doesn't say that the angel spoke through the donkey. It says he opened the donkey's mouth. And the donkey says, "Why have you been beating me these 3 times? Haven't I been a good donkey?" I mean,
it's the best story.
I like the cognition, the level of cognition. I've been a good donkey. Why are you hitting me? I mean, it's like, I think that I wouldn't be surprised, not only in having some of the pets that we love will be there. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually talk. So
I'm speculating. It'd be like the reverse of how it is now, where the atheists say, "Well, you guys believe in talking donkeys and snakes," and the end will be like, "You guys don't believe in talking donkeys and snakes."
Well, it could be. You never know. Could be. I lean that way myself. I don't know. I've never thought about talking, but I do lean myself.
Well, what I find kind of interesting from the concepts that are being brought up there, which obviously the atheists, when they look at this, are going to take this into the hyper, their atheist hyper literalist disorder will kick in, and they'll extrapolate this out into hyper realism. But anyway, for anybody who has read the studies on near death experiences, they will recognize that there's all sorts of aspects of the next level of existence that are very common with people who've had the NDEs and OBEs, and they talk about how there's this additional layer of life, and light comes out of everything, and there's connection and communication, and you're not speaking with words, you're able to connect in the mind and communicate in a completely different, not completely different, but in a much more direct, intimate, and intense way in which you're being able to experience the other person's frame of reference, which is obviously the major thing in our current stage of existence, where we can never truly know what the other person is feeling, thinking, seeing, etc. But in so much of the NDE research, that is no longer the case, right? So in relation to the communication with animals and all those kind of things, whether or not they're going to have the same level of cognition that we will is different than whether or not we would be able to sense, feel, understand, and connect with what they are feeling, right? Because, we look at our little dogs, and, when they come and want to be petted, and want you to pet them, they want to play, and all that kind of stuff. You can tell that they do have emotion of some kind, and we don't have the ability to truly feel whatever that what they are feeling. So it's entirely possible that if you're removing the physical barrier from the equation, that that connection point could suddenly become plausible. Again, this is speculation. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm saying that if you actually open your mind and think about things from beyond the strict materialist frame of reference, then a lot of these things become completely plausible, very reasonable, and honestly kind of interesting, if you ask me.
But they're there. Balaam's donkey has been a better servant to the Lord than a lot of other people that I know. So,
if you want to Google something, Google Alex the Talking Parrot by a professor worked with Alex. This parrot, her name's Pepperberg, is written up in Scientific American. You can find a video of Alex talking. Alex knew 1,100 words, could count to 6, could identify objects by shape, color, and texture, and she'd give it different challenges and say, how many blue blocks? And there'd be blue triangles and blue other things, and then there'd be green, and Alex could count them and tell her. So just saying,
let that bird run for
I'm glad there's not going to be resentment in heaven if all those animals are going to be there, because they've got a pretty good case.
Yeah, they would have a good case. Yeah,
that would be bad.
Yeah. So we got some questions here. I don't know why that's there. All right, here is one from. I think this one came earlier. So Christoph Keating says, hold on just a second here. Just as Adam presumably never had to learn not to crawl into dog poop or how to talk and walk, but was inbuilt with that knowledge, could he have been inbuilt with the knowledge of how bad sin is?
I'm not sure that he didn't have to learn to not walk into dog poop. I don't know how much knowledge was built into him. But, part of there's different kinds of answers to this, but part of the one was from the beginning of the ages, it was always expected that Adam was going to sin because the Lord wanted to have Jesus come to die for the sins of the world, where the scripture says that the lamb was slain before the foundation of the world. It was slain before the foundation of the world, in God's mind, that this is going to be accomplished. It's fait accompli. It's done. And so the Lord wanted to give Adam free will and did give him free will and knew, frankly, he knew it didn't take, oh, wow, we sinned. Who knew? And notice there was also epistemic distance. We haven't actually used that phrase, but there was divine hiddenness going on in the garden. That the Lord was not sitting next to Adam and Eve or standing next to Adam and Eve when they decided to rebel. Where was he? He wasn't there. He was out doing something else. And so I think that free will, again, this is about free will. God wants to create creatures with free will. And we are now learning that indeed Adam's sinful choice was really horrific. And in fact, it resulted in the death of every man, woman, and child.
Yeah, I always say about the tree in the garden, it makes perfect sense on free will because there had to be something to freely sacrifice every day in service to your king. And I think it makes perfect sense there. If there's no tree, there's nothing to exercise your free will. I mean, you could on nominal things, but in a meaningful way like that.
Right.
All right. So thank you for that. And thank you for that super chat. All right. Chris Date here says, I don't fear hell now because of Christ's atoning work covers my sins. Won't that be true in heaven too? So I think he's referring there to the notion that eternal conscious torment would serve as an ongoing reminder not to turn away from Yahweh in heaven.
All I can say to that is that I don't, for instance, I know there are venomous snakes not far from where I live. And I definitely watch out for them, but I don't live in fear of them. I know they're there. I know there are things in my garage that could kill me dead very quickly. It's kind of that, but I don't say, oh my gosh, there's things in my garage that could kill me. Yeah. So I don't think that knowing that something's going to happen when it's not going to be something that I'm going to do, but seeing the results of the horror of rebellion. I think
the eternal reminder, not the eternal. You don't all of a sudden forget that Christ atoned for your sins in heaven. What you're saying is it's an eternal reminder of that education and the consequences.
That's right.
That's
So is it an eternal warning or an eternal reminder? I guess.
Eternal reminder.
I think it's an eternal reminder, not an eternal warning. We're being reminded of the horror of rebellion. Also, there's this interesting thing, and I think that people. One day I was studying Ephesians 2, and just lights went on, and the light that went on was that it says that we Christians are seated with Christ in the heavenly places, and that in the coming ages, the Lord intends to use us as examples of his grace in the coming ages. See, whereas the non-Christians, those who reject Jesus, may be an example of what happens when you do that, the Christian is going to be an example of God's grace and God's wonder throughout the ages, through the coming ages. Read Ephesians 2. It's fascinating. So I think the Lord is building things in there to say, see, Jesus in his post-resurrection body, his glorified body, still had the wounds. And I think that that's another eternal reminder, right? Eternal reminder. That's a good point. We're going to be seated in the heavenly places. That's an eternal reminder. Hell is going to be an eternal reminder of what's going on. And plus, I think we'll see, I think if we wanted to, this is speculation. I don't build a doctrine on it. But I wouldn't be surprised if we could go in like the rich man and Lazarus and say, and even go in at C.S. Lewis's wonderful work, The Great Divorce, and say, so why what's going on? And hear their stupid excuses and see their lies and all the folly that they're telling on why they don't deserve where they are, like I said, that's speculation. Don't build a doctrine on it. I don't know that it's.
Well, you can't talk about this stuff too much without some speculation.
Yeah, and I think I always say speculation's fine as long as you label it speculation, and realize I'm not going to build a doctrine on it.
Okay.
You're muted, LPP.
All right, so I guess now it's time for us to allow the open mic to get going. And without exception, Jackson likes to get here first and be the first one backstage, and he has successfully accomplished that yet again. So if anybody wants to come on in to the stream, we're gonna have some open conversation for a little bit, and I'll probably do like maybe another hour of open discussion. It can be about the interview with Dr. Jones, the problem of evil concepts, divine hiddenness, all these different things, or we can go into a variety of other topics, depending on where we go. And as you know, I am never too rigid on how things can go forth in the after shows and in open discussion. So without further ado, what's up, Jackson? How you doing? Welcome to the stream, man. What are your thoughts on what you just said and what's on your mind in general?
I'm good. Still mad about that animal thing I keep talking about, but yeah, it was interesting. The only thing that really resonated with me was the example that I gave about the gospel being written in the cosmic background radiation or whatever. And maybe that is too much to ask, but yeah, I mean, something small would convince me too, probably. I mean, I don't know, but I took some notes. Like, I don't know if I'll say there might be a God, but I don't think I'll ever get to the point where there's 100% of the Bible is true, like he was talking about the talking donkey part, and I just don't see that ever happening. But that's pretty much all I have to say for that so far.
It's funny, I talked with Michael, the Canadian atheist, and that was an objection that he made. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You're an evolutionist, right? Don't you guys believe that anything is possible with time? You believe that monkeys talk, right? That's us. Monkeying around, talking to each other.
Well, parrots and humans can talk.
Yeah. Well, perhaps there was a group of donkeys that was isolated and they got a mutation that allowed them to speak. But either way, the point is that's a misrepresentation of the biblical worldview, right? So it's like imagine if you had two phones. You have an Android and an Apple. Those are two totally different operating systems. So on the Christian worldview, on the Christian operating system, it's nothing for God to open up the mouth of a donkey. Where's the problem with that?
Well, there's not necessarily a problem with it. I just don't see it as being a literal part of the Bible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's fine. But I mean, on a biblical worldview, it could be. There are some that say that it is an angel speaking through the donkey, because if you continue to read, you'll see that when then the angel revealed himself, and he pretty much said the same thing that the donkey had just said. So that could have been, or it could have been that simply God allowed the donkey to speak. Could have been that too.
Could have been.
So Jackson, in relation to the, free will aspect of why God isn't doing something so massive, right? Mm-hmm. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, it might be too much to ask for something like that. If that's what you mean.
Well, no, I mean, so the point that Dr. Jones was making was, if God did something so massive, i.e., right in the book of John or whatever it is, in the cosmic microwave background radiation, right? Mm-hmm. Then you would not have you wouldn't come to any other conclusion, right?
No,
other
that would have to be the Christian God.
Right. And by default, that would mean you didn't have free will.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
well, no, in terms of believing or not believing.
Well, you could still, someone could still look at that and say, no, it's not good enough. If it really came down to it.
Well, you could, but let's just be honest. That person would have to be insane.
Sure, but they're insane people.
Right, but we're talking about there's a much, you're extrapolating out from the current frame of reference, right? Mm-hmm. If the book of, if I am God and I created you was visible from the second you were born to adulthood, right? The whole, and that's how it's always been. nobody's going to not believe in God. Like that's just
Right.
reality. The only reason, and he made the point earlier in the interview about like, other than now, and very, very isolated aspects in history, right? But like, other than the modern era, the whole concept of atheism has not even like it basically didn't exist, right? Or it's like very like major outlier, like major outlier. If anything, in previous times, the atheist was considered insane. Right? Like they were considered kind of out there, right? Is my point.
Possibly.
And in those times, the reason for it was that it seemed from their perspective, that there was all this evidence, right? There was the only rational conclusion was that there was a God. Now, which one it was argued over, right, and fought over, and people did all sorts of crazy stuff over which one was the correct one. But hardly anybody was arguing that there wasn't one.
Right.
That's the new thing. So going back to the whole point of free will, if you completely removed any reasonable conclusion that there is not a God, then you don't really have a choice to whether or not you believe or don't believe in God. If you're rejecting it, it's being done through a completely irrational perspective rather than a rational one. And I don't think atheists all try to argue that their conclusion is rational and not emotional, correct?
Most of them, I would think so, yeah.
If they make the claim. Very often there's a lot of it. You're more of a outlier in relation that you're not getting all like emotionally worked up on stuff. At least you like keep your poker face up. If it's not the truth. But the point is that on the other side, there's a heck of a lot of very emotional atheists.
Sure.
So anyway, what do you have anything to say on that, Sam? I mean, I know you've been dealing with a heck of a lot of emotional atheists over on Clubhouse this past couple months. Would you agree or disagree with what I just said?
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. But ironically, but Jackson, let me ask you. I know you said that something about God writing something in the heavens. What about God writing, giving you a sign within your body, within the very proteins that glue you together? Have you ever heard of laminin?
Yeah, I've heard of that, but it could just be shaped like a cross. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's definitely. I mean, I know where you're going with that, but
well, that's the thing. It's like on your worldview, right, where you reject God, you're not allowed to have anything be evidence of God, and so that's where you would argue if there's this divine Hiddenness type problem from your position. But over on our side, it's the opposite, right? Like you say there's no evidence of God, right?
Well, I say it's inconclusive evidence, maybe.
Yeah. But on the biblical worldview, everything is evidence of God. So if I were to ask you how you determine that everything isn't evidence of God, how would you respond to that?
Say that last part again.
If I were to ask you how you determined that everything, including the tree in front of your house, how did you determine that an apple on your counter is not evidence of God?
I don't know. Good question. I don't know how to answer, but I don't really dabble in the kind of theology side of this stuff, so I'm not.
No, it's a fair question, because if you're gonna make the assertion that there's not evidence of God, that God would need to reveal Himself to you, then you have already concluded that everything isn't evidence of God. And so it's a fair question to ask, well, how did you determine that, right?
Well, I think things can exist not necessarily without a God. I mean, doesn't necessarily require a God. It could be evidence of a God, but I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's kind of an inconclusive line of evidence.
Well, then you wouldn't be talking about the Christian God, because on the Christian God, there's no neutrality. You'll either be for or against the Christian God. That's what the Bible says. So the Bible presents you with a true dichotomy, right? Either everything will be evidence of God, including that apple or the tree in front of your house or that single blade of grass, or they will not. And so, I guess in an analogy, I hate using analogies because they all fail, right? So you would say, like, again, Apple versus Macintosh, or Macintosh versus Android. You have two separate operating systems, right? But unlike the Macintosh and the Android analogy, only one of these positions can provide a response or an answer to that question. So if I were to ask you on your worldview, how do you determine that everything isn't evidence of God? You don't really have an answer for that, right?
Well,
so, but on our side, go ahead.
Kind of say the best evidence I think that I've heard is the DNA argument for how complex the DNA is. I think that's the best argument there is for the existence of some kind of creator.
Yeah, but even then, you're still presupposing that everything isn't evidence of God. But I'm wondering if you can rationally justify that.
I don't know. I guess I don't really understand the concept, really.
Well, when somebody asks for evidence of something, there's like an underlying, a hidden premise in there that's, that you've already came to the conclusion. So when you say, I want evidence of God, smuggled in that comment is a premise that you've already concluded that nothing is evidence of God, or else you wouldn't be asking for evidence. So you've already determined that nothing is evidence of God. So when I ask you how you determine that, if it is your position, let me ask you, is it your position that beliefs held without evidence are irrational?
Beliefs held without evidence? I mean, not necessarily. I don't have any problem with people who hold beliefs that don't really have any evidence backing them. Any belief it is, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else,
That's an interesting answer.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's an interesting answer. But the thing is, when you're talking with a Christian, though, you are requesting evidence. So your standard of criteria is evidence. That's what you're asking for. You're saying, hey, my standard of criteria to believe something, a worldview, is evidence. So if that's the case, then it would also be fair for me to ask you, since your standard of criteria is evidence, what evidence do you have that your worldview, where there is no God, is true? What evidence do you have that everything is not evidence of God? If it's a fair question for you to ask the Christian, which it is, I don't have a problem if answering that, then it would also be a fair question for the Christian to ask you. You see? And the problem is if you don't have an answer for that, which is fine, standard of criteria.
Well, evidence against God, it's also kind of inconclusive because it goes kind of both ways. But I could say evolution or Big Bang Theory, evidence against maybe a literal interpretation of a biblical God.
Yeah, well, see, that wouldn't be evidence against God. Now, I would agree with you that those positions would be inconsistent, but William Lane Craig, he doesn't have a problem with that.
Sure,
William Lane Craig believes in evolution, and that's not a defeater for God. But I would respond that that's a misrepresentation of my worldview. You wouldn't be accurately representing what I believe, and so you would be essentially attacking a straw man. But the only thing that I'm pointing out is if you're going to ask for, if you are going to ask for evidence, then your standard of criteria is evidence. So then I should be able to ask you that same question, and you should be able to meet your own standard, right? So if you were to ask me what is evidence of God, I would say everything is evidence of God. And if you were to ask me how I knew that, I would say because that's what God revealed.
Well, let me ask you this: what would be evidence against God? Kind of
a single fact that does not stand in causal relation to God. The Bible says that God created the heavens and the earth and the seas and all that is in them. So if that's true, then everything would be evidence of God. So you would have to provide me with something that is not evidence of God.
All right. Decent answer. Why are there 2 Jasons? No, they're not anymore.
What's up? We got Danny, Jason, and Bubblegum. What's going on, y'all?
You sound tired, LFF.
Yeah, I'm a little bit tired. But not too bad. It's how you been, Danny?
I've been doing well. Nothing really new.
Nothing new. Did you watch this interview yesterday, or did you see any part of the review?
I did watch a little bit of it yesterday, and then I watched the tail end of the review. But I'm always multitasking.
Gotcha. So what? I know that the problem of evil is one of your major hiccups. So what say you?
I mean, anything I say will kind of get deep into it. But I did look at his book. I don't know. Like, I'm just not very persuaded by the free will theodicy. It seems like if I had to take a theodicy, I'd probably take skeptical theism instead of like a free will theodicy. But I don't know. That's probably that's all I can contribute now without getting really deep into it. But
okay, so you reject the premise of free will allowing for evil?
Yeah, because God has free will, and so, but he can't do evil. So I don't really see how free will necessitates the possibility of evil.
Well, if evil is the antithesis of God, right, and is like, which I think is a relatively well-established concept, then why would God be what he is not? Like,
yeah, so it seems like
because are we supposed to be God?
Yeah, but I think the point is that like, if God only does God things, couldn't God make us in a way where our options are limited to only things that he would do? It seems like
you're not acknowledging the creator-creature distinction.
That and Danny, I don't know if you heard me talking about this earlier, but this is the whole aspect of, and it wasn't you that I was making fun of, actually. This is somebody else that was making this same point of, if I can only choose A, then I never had the functional capacity to choose not A.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So then by default, I don't have free will.
Sure.
If I can only choose A. So you're saying, so the whole point you made is defeated.
No, because the point is that I can make.
Not if I'm gonna have free. No, if you're
let
saying,
me explain it to you,
dude. You stated that God is gonna programming you to only choose A.
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said God would set it up so you only choose A.
No, I didn't say that. If you were on the tape, I said only choose the good. That's not only choose A. There could be multiple options that are all equally as good.
But that's incoherent.
What's incoherent?
You can't have free will without the ability to choose. You know, your idea of free will is going to buy a car at a car lot where every single car is the same, but you're like, hey, look, there's different cars, but they're all identical. That's not free will. You're not going to have free will unless you have the ability to sin. So when you have an incoherent definition of omnipotence if you're suggesting that God can actualize a world where you can have both free will but at the same time not free will to choose something that's wrong.
Yeah, the point is that there can be multiple.
You'll have to explain how that would be logical or even possible.
Yeah. So, for instance, you think that God could have not created. It's not like he was necessarily he had to create. If God chose not to create, that world would be equally as good as this one.
We're not talking about that, though.
We're
talking about the actual biblical world.
Well, what are we not talking about? Can you explain what we're not talking about? Because I was trying to give a point.
Well, are you going to represent the biblical worldview?
Yeah.
Okay, so what God could have or should have done is not relevant.
Yes, it is. With
You
respect
need
to
to
free will, it
address
is.
what God did. Sure.
I already can. Of course, no one's going to disagree that God created on a Christian worldview. They shouldn't disagree about whether God could have not created it. No sophisticated Christian is going to think that God must have created, right? That it was necessarily true that God creates. Could have been that he didn't create, right?
So Danny, it's actually interesting that you say no sophisticated Christian would, because I hear atheists make the argument that God must have created this, like must create. So how do you address that?
Yeah, Danny, some Christians do say that God didn't have free will. It's part of his nature to create. He could not have not created.
Yeah, there are going to be a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, there's a ton of problems with that.
Yeah, but
no, I agree. There's many problems with that.
I'm not making a claim that it's a popular answer. I'm making a claim that it's an unsophisticated line of thought.
No, I agree with you, Dan. The point, I was asking you, then why? Because I agree with you, but why do I hear tons of atheists doing the reciprocal?
Yeah. So my view is that that it was indeterministic. God must have created for no reason at all, because if he had a reason to create, then that necessitates the outcome, because God can't do otherwise if he has greatest reason to do one thing over another. So every time God makes a choice, he would have equal reason to do differently. So there's nothing to explain why he did one set of actions rather than another, which means that it's indeterministic. If it's undeterministic, it's random.
Are you trying to present some sort of modal collapse argument?
No, I'm just saying that when God makes a choice, he could have done otherwise. I'm fine with that.
I don't understand why you're trying to bind God with some reasoning of man, saying that God necessarily had to do something.
You don't think God has a reason to do anything?
Well, yeah, I'm sure if he has a reason to do something.
Yeah, that's all I'm talking about. I'm using that sense of reason.
And that's what Clay Jones said today too.
He said that what?
He said that God, the reason why God created man and put, let's say, Satan or evil in the garden was because he had a plan, and his plan was for salvation through Christ. So a little bit of sin is good, because without that sin, Jesus couldn't have come and saved us.
You see, what's really tricky about that Pine Creek is that I think that if God had greater reason to create, then it does imply that everything is necessary. But so I think there's a problem in Clay saying that if God had had greater reason to create than not create, then I think you get what we call, us philosophers say, we call it modal collapse. Nothing could have been different, which is why I'm saying the only way to get out of that is to say that there is no explanation for why God created rather than not create. And they don't want to say that either. So, but I think that's the best way out.
No, I think the best way out is to say God was surprised.
Yeah, no, I think so. I have, and I'll try to send you this link. I have this guy that he shows that the modal collapse is a invalid argument.
That's a conclusion. That's not an argument. Right. The point is that if God had most reason to do X, he can't do otherwise because he's not irrational. Right. The thing is about me is that it might be the case that I have most reason to do something, but given that I'm a fallible being, I can do differently. I can make a mistake. But if God has most reason to do something, given his infallibility, he will do it necessarily. And so that leads to all things that God does as being things that necessarily happen. So the way out of that is just say that God's actions are random.
Yeah, I don't see how that follows. I think just
what premise do you reject?
You're just asserting that God somehow has to do something because he does something. So you're saying, if God does something, then necessarily he has to do
that's
that
not my
thing.
argument. Maybe do one premise at a time. Do you think that there are cases where God has most reason to do something rather than not?
I don't know what you mean by most. I would agree. I think I would mostly agree with the way that Pine Creek said it, that God has a plan for salvation. And God initiated this plan for salvation, and he did it a certain way. And so we have free will, and you can't have free will unless you have the ability to choose something wrong.
All right, so then God doesn't have free will.
The only way, but
yeah, but then if God doesn't have the ability to do something wrong, then God does not have free will. That can't be the definition.
Not in the same sense as he doesn't have a creaturely free will.
What's the difference between creaturely free will and free will?
That God doesn't have the ability to sin.
Okay, so is that how are you not special pleading there?
There's a creator-creature distinction. So my idea of heaven, I think it was a little bit different than what we were listening. But, I believe that God doesn't have the same free will that we have, because there are things that God can't do. He can't stop being eternal. He can't lie. He can't deny himself. So, yeah. So
seems like you're conflating freedom of choice.
You have the ability to deny God, and you have the ability to do these sins that God can't do. So there is a distinction between the creator and the creature, and you're trying to bound the creator from your creaturely reasoning.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems here. Number one, no serious Christian apologist takes task-based omnipotence. It's not the distinct, like when we say that God can't lie, I can lie, so I can do something.
Are you trying to bind? Yeah, well, we can clear this up really quick. Are you trying to bind God?
Wait, you didn't let me finish. What do you think I was going to say?
Are you trying to bind? Well, I'm asking you. So are you trying to bind God with his creaturely free will?
No. Let me explain to you what I'm saying.
So you understand that God does not have the same free will as his creation?
No. I'm giving you the first problem with what you said. The first problem is that excuse me, sir. I let you finish. Will you let me finish?
Yeah. Well, I'm asking for clarification.
Okay, tell me when I can speak.
I asked you one question and you said no, and then the follow-up question was the opposite.
You understand? You interrupted me, Sam. You understand? You interrupted what I was saying.
Wrong is different from being blocked.
It's a true dichotomy for you, Danny. Either God has creaturely free will, or he doesn't. Which is it?
Well, I don't know.
Does God have creaturely free will or not?
What's the difference between creaturely free will and free will?
I've already explained that.
Is it just the ability to do evil? It's just the ability to do evil? Is that what you mean?
On Christianity, there's a difference between the creator and the creature. Okay.
If you're asking me if God is a creature, he's not a creature. There you go.
Well, maybe you should do a little bit more listening and a little bit less talking.
Okay? You're the one interrupting
me. So on
me.
Christianity, there's a creator and the creature. And you're saying, hey, us creatures, we have this free will. And you're trying to say that God should have that same free will. I'm saying, no, that's not the case. God does not have the same free will, because there are things that God cannot do. I've already made that clear. And so my clarification question for you is, are you trying to bind God with the creaturely free will? Are you trying to say that would apply to the creator?
Yeah, I just take free will the ability to do otherwise. So creaturely free.
Is there an answer in there?
Yeah, Danny, just say
Where's
no.
Where's the answer?
And then we can move on.
Okay, well, fine. He's not a creature, so he's not going to have creaturely anything.
But it doesn't change anything.
Can you just directly answer my question? Does God have creaturely free will or not?
Given that he's not a creature, the answer to your question is no.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so but I don't see what turns on that.
Redefine the real problem of evil to me is that God created in the first place. So, and I think every Christian struggles with this, because you can have this idea of a world of
so God's a cosmic meanie. How does it follow that there is no God?
We're not talking about that. We're talking about that if this God could
God hurt your feelings and you're upset. So
if this particular God could have chosen not to create, if this God hates sin tremendously, if this God can see the future,
so you don't understand why God did what he did and your feelings are hurt.
Could I ask one question?
Does it follow from that there is no God, Pine Creek?
No.
That's all I came on here for.
Okay.
Now, can I ask you some questions, Redefine?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Can I ask one question of Jackson Rowe, please?
Well, let me rephrase. So Pine Creek, I've interacted with you multiple times, and you've dodged every question that I've asked you. And now you want to ask me questions, and you want me to, most
I just answered directly one right here.
Yeah.
So, lying's a sin, right?
Most questions.
There you go.
I corrected myself.
There you go.
But thank you.
So here's the issue of the problem of evil that I see, and I think this ties in with what Clay Jones was saying, that if you have this idea of a God hating sin and knowing perfectly without ever being wrong that what he's about to create will lead to something he hates, and he doesn't need people to worship him, he doesn't need people, why create at all? That's and there's a little bit of a contradiction there, and I know Christians and Muslims, they don't see it, but I think for atheists, we see this as an internal critique type contradiction.
Well, it's not a contradiction. You're saying that you're ignorant of these things and you're calling it a contradiction. But what you're going to need to do, Pine Creek, is you're going to need to show that the evil that God allows is somehow going to overwhelm his greater plan of goodness. Okay? That's what you're going to need to show. And I asked Danny to do that on a clubhouse, and Danny had a little bit of a meltdown, dumpster fire, but that's fine. We enjoy those
Redefine,
sometimes.
does God want anyone to perish?
But he didn't answer the question. So that's all you're going to need to do. You're just going to simply need to show, Pine Creek.
Yeah, I will. I'm
that
going
the
to show
evil
right now.
things,
Does God want anyone to perish?
Yeah, hold on. Let me ask that question. So all you're going to need to do is you're going to need to show that the evil that God does allow, which he does allow, you're going to have to show that somehow overwhelms his overall plan of salvation and goodness. Are you able to do that?
No, of course not.
Okay, so then you don't have a.
Does God want
really
anyone
have
to
a good
perish?
argument? Then you just have an emotional complaint
that
God hurt your feelings.
Does God want anyone to perish?
No.
Well, no, he doesn't. He doesn't want
sometimes,
everyone.
I suppose.
So
he knocks people on the head. King David was going to kill someone once, and God knocked the guy on the head so King David wouldn't sin and kill him. And the guy was an evil piece of garbage anyway. So, you know.
Does God? So, Redefine. Did you answer that question? Does God want anyone to perish? Did you say no?
Yeah, God doesn't want anyone to perish. But before you conclude with now God is not all powerful. Okay, I'm defining God's omnipotence as being able to do something that is being able to do anything that is logically possible. Okay, so you're going to have to show how there's some logical contradiction that God can actualize a world where people have free will and they can freely reject his gift of salvation, yet he will still save them anyway. I don't think that's logically possible. So do you have another argument?
Did God? I just want to hear yes or no answers. That's all I need.
I don't need a college
these are complicated questions, and I'm not going to give you a simple yes or no anscer.
Did God desire to create? Is that a complicated question?
I don't need a college lecture.
Pine Creek, what was
Can
unclear
I ask Jackson
about
just one quick question, please?
What was unclear about my answer?
This is going to go on for hours.
That was
it was very clear. You said no.
That was a clear and precise and sufficient answer.
So you said no, God doesn't want anyone to perish.
It'll take you about 3 seconds to answer it. Take me 5 seconds to say it and you 3 seconds to answer it. What do you think about Aaron Ra coming out as a Satanist?
As a Satanist?
What do you think about?
No, that's a really boring question.
No surprise.
He came out today. He came out today with admitting that he's a bona fide Satanist. He's at so he's a religious person.
No one cares. Well, let's just talk about the problem of evil.
I'm asking Jackson.
Here's what I understand about it. I haven't watched his video, but I've seen some of his posts about it. And from what I understand, he doesn't actually believe in Satan. It's basically just a more edgy atheist. That's what I understand.
That's what a lot of Satanists say. Yeah. A lot of Satanists say that sort of stuff, that Satan is the father of lies. So they're encouraged to lie. So I've got a friend here that was in a satanic coven, and for a while he just got into it for the sex and stuff like that. He didn't want to sacrifice people or anything, but he's left it now. But they always say stuff like that. They always contradict and say, I'm not really believing it. But yeah, he does believe in it. Have you watched his speech? I mean, he outright admits. He outright admits, I am a Satanist. I'm not an evolutionist. I'm not a thing. I'm a Satanist. I've literally watched it. So he is a Satanist.
If he really believes in Satan, he's definitely wrong, in my opinion.
He's at the biggest gathering of like this satanic conference that ever was on Earth at the moment. And he's there, and I saw him speak with his own words and say that he is a Satanist. He's not a evolutionist. He's not a thing. He's an actual religious person. So you guys have been following a religious person all this time. Terrible reason.
But right.
That's right.
Hey, Jackson, don't you? Jackson,
that's all.
Don't you ever find?
That's it.
Hey Jackson, don't you find it kind of fishy every time like someone like Darth Dawkins asks somebody, "Are you an atheist or theist?" and they'll kind of dodge that question and say they're an atheist, and they'll say they're more of a bit of agnostic, like it's about not believing in a god. Well, they don't want to say existing because a bunch of Satanists don't believe in God, but they acknowledge he exists. So you do have a bunch of atheists real intentionally misusing that word to not admit that they know God exists. They choose not to believe in God. Those are two different things. That's why they do that.
Maybe, I don't know. That's not what I do. But
I just want to reiterate what Jason acknowledged.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
Jackson, unlike Aaron Ra, is not a Satanist. He's actually a salamanderist, and it's a key distinction. And it's part of the reason
his colors all the time.
he's trying to. That's why he's advocating for legislation regarding reptile and salamander transport. It's actually part of his religion. And he's trying to, through a very cloak and dagger mechanism, to force his religion down the throats of everyone. That's what's actually happening.
Yeah,
Jackson,
my religion.
So Jackson, do you affirm or deny that you're a salamanderist?
It's a subset of atheists, but yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you being open.
No,
does that make you more scared of Aaron Ra if he's a Satanist, Jason?
Oh, definitely not. I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that all these people have been following him all these years, and he's actually a religious person pretending to be an atheist. It's no, it doesn't make me scared of him.
I mean, it pretty much confirms that his actions are more nefarious than they were led to be.
I accused Aaron Ra of being an atheist 2 years ago on one of Kent Hovind's streams when him and Kent were going back and forth. I mean, his name, the fact he always wears black, he looks like that villain from that Disney movie. What is it? Sleeping Beauty or whatever. The guy with the long. Yeah. Yeah.
He does that. He does that on purpose, though, just to scare Christians, I think.
The Pocahontas one, the fat one.
Yeah. But no, who's scared of Mr. Nelson? That guy is a joke. Yeah, he's just a fat retard that needs to get saved. And
well, he just needs a haircut. He just needs a haircut.
Yeah, he needs a haircut and a shave.
It doesn't really help that he looks like a Satanist. So
exactly. And his name,
he definitely does.
His name is real name. You're calling yourself Aaron Ra, like it's obvious you'd make a link with the sun god. Like, yeah, you're satanic, dude.
Hey, well, at least he believes the Bible is true now. Okay.
Yeah.
That is the implication. You can't have Satan without the Bible being true.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, I think it's just an edgier atheism.
Well, and if you think about it, the Satan of the Bible is not that bad of a guy. He only killed 7 people, Job's family. That's not bad. God killed way more.
What? Who said that?
Oh, Pine Creek. What an amazing!
Pine Creek, that was one of the most retarded.
What an amazingly ignorant comment.
They're angry, Pine Creek.
What? Would you say, Danny?
They're angry.
That's one of Pine Creek's extraordinarily juvenile talking points. He likes.
Well, I'm just. Can someone find
to get people riled up? The reason he's not on, like he usually has the camera on when he comes in here, but he knows that I'll call him out for being a smirking little smartass all the time, and therefore he's not showing his face while he still issues the same snarky talking points that are designed to cause juvenile interaction. It's the whole point of Pine Creek.
Did I say something factually incorrect?
Well,
I said that Satan killed about 6 or 7 people in the Bible, whereas Yahweh killed way, way, way more.
Satan doesn't want to kill people.
Pine Creek. Hold on, Pine Creek. Who is responsible for the temptation of in the garden, which resulted into sin and man being bound by law?
That's a great question.
Because of that, so Satan technically has 100% kill rate. So what are you talking about?
Redefine. How would Clay Jones answer that question?
I'm asking you.
Well,
Is this another Pine Creek
I'm
dodge?
going to paraphrase Clay Jones. He said it was part of God's plan to put Satan in the garden because without sin, Jesus couldn't come to save and redeem humanity.
Again, and are you acknowledging the free? Are you acknowledging the free will?
No.
Of course you're not.
Yeah, so we're all agreed.
Because you're the straw man master. Yeah.
God put Satan in the garden so they could use their free will to sin.
Yeah. So God puts Satan in the garden, and then what does Satan do?
He tempts Eve.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I know the story.
And what was the consequence of that?
Sin entered the world.
Yeah, so there you go.
The earth had groaned. They had to now toil the land, and there'd be pain in childbirth. Yeah. But would Satan have been there if God didn't want Satan to be there?
Well, that was part of God's overall plan. But is it God's a cosmic?
That just makes him responsible then.
Because he hurts your feelings.
Shut up with that stupid stuff.
Well, no, that doesn't work either, Danny. That's what we were talking about earlier.
If it's God's plan,
as a parent. Okay.
Was it God's plan to put Satan in the garden?
Let's talk about how silly your.
He's not going to answer that question.
Let's talk about how silly your assertion is. So, as a parent, should a parent just lock their child in a padded room? Because if I let my child out of that padded room, they're going to go into the world and they're going to get hurt, and I'm going to be responsible for that.
Right.
That's the reasoning of a student of philosophy.
No, I don't.
That's brilliant, Danny.
Would you give your child
Pine Creek?
Would you give your child a loaded gun? Redefine.
Pine Creek. Are you going to answer my question?
Yeah.
As a parent, should you lock your child in a padded room?
No.
Because you know if they go out of that padded room, they're going to hurt themselves, and you will ultimately be responsible for every bad thing.
I will be responsible as the parent.
Do you live your life that way, Pine Creek?
What did you just say? I will be responsible as the parent, but God's not responsible
Would you not?
for his creation?
Would you not? Well, according to your reasoning, that's what you said.
You
said God is ultimate.
Sam, you said God.
You're agreeing with me, Redefine. You don't.
No,
even
I said
it.
no. I'm being rhetorical. Okay, I'm showing you that's a foolish thing to say. I'm saying that's a foolish thing to say.
Sam, he knows.
Yes, if I let my child out of the padded room, they're probably going to get hurt. And if that child decides to make a bad decision, well, maybe it's true that I should have kept them locked in a padded room. I guess God could have made you a blade of grass where you could just blow in the wind and have no free choices. Is that your position, Pine Creek?
I don't even know what you're saying.
Should God have kept everyone locked in padded cells where they could never do anything bad?
No. I have answered.
You're like, God's a cosmic meanie. Why? Because he gave us free will. He should have locked us all in a prison. Maybe prison is your idea of a perfect world.
Sam, hang on. I think the actual next layer of the question is, should you have never had the child? Should you never have become a parent?
Well, here's the problem.
Yeah, that's a good question, LPP.
But we got J. Robin just joined us. What's up, J. Robin? How you doing?
Good evening.
Welcome to the stream. Did you see any of the review or the interview over on Trinity Radio, or are you just joining in for the conversation? What brings you to the stream tonight?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't get a chance. I just stopped in just now, so I didn't get a chance to look at any of the things that happened prior. But yeah,
that's okay. There was an interesting interview by the guys at Trinity Radio with Clay Jones. They were talking about the problem of evil, divine hiddenness, things of that nature. And now we're kind of degenerating into a dumpster fire of, should God have allowed us to exist? Is it God's fault? Is God the cosmic meanie, as Sam likes to say? Or, basically, can we dodge any and all responsibility?
Gotcha. Right.
I know where this goes. Rational argument.
Well, this is the thing. You can't have free will without the possibility of evil.
Then God doesn't have free will.
And I'm going to have 5 years the possibility of parole.
Here's another misconception you guys get wrong, especially Christians. Morality is in the...
Do you think God has free will?
I would say yes.
Well,
okay,
but hold on a minute.
By your definition, he can do evil then.
Yeah, well, Bubblegum is not a Christian.
Yeah, I'm not a Christian because Christians believe. Yeah, because Christians believe God is morally objective.
Bubblegum believes. No. Hold on, Bubblegum. If Danny asks a Christian a question, why would you answer?
I thought he was asking me.
I think the real question for Bubblegum is, do you retract your position that you could have string go from Mount Everest to Los Angeles for less than $100?
Sure, okay, but if you get a gun, I think you can pull it off.
Do you hang on? What, you're still holding that's actually a plausible deal?
No, of course not. Are you still on that?
Okay. So you do formally reject that premise.
You're still on this. Yes, yeah. It's a wacky premise.
Oh, okay, cool. And do you also do you also reject your position that you could somehow fly to Beijing for less than $100?
Yes, it was just to reply to the flat earther, like, that he needed billions of dollars. It wasn't supposed to be like literally it's just $100.
Well, you doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on that talking point.
No, it was just an example. Like you didn't need a
right, but when we were interacting and I was calling you out on it, you didn't retract it then.
I did retract that.
Not in the moment. You did not. You just retracted it right now. You didn't retract it that evening.
No, I did retract that. It was more than $100. I did say, yeah.
Okay, all right. We can continue now. I just wanted to make sure that insanity was fully cleared up. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, it was just a quick and dirty. The math didn't need to be exact. It was just like, it doesn't take billions of dollars.
How are you going to string the string up from Beijing to California? That would take millions of dollars.
Well, heck, we can even use a laser. We don't need to use a string.
Okay, that would work better.
So Pine Creek.
Yes.
Have you figured out a good reason why God doesn't exist yet?
Your God? Yeah, the problem of evil is a pretty big one. But there's no way, like, we can talk about it.
How is that a defeater for God?
It's a defeater for the Christian God, not a God.
You guys have well, that's what you've said, but you haven't been able to show that. You're going to have to show.
There's no way I can show it to you because if I convince you about this, your whole world is crushed.
You're going to have to show. You're going to have to show that the evil things that God allows are going to overwhelm His greater plan of goodness and salvation.
Yeah, okay.
If you're not able to do that, then you don't.
Okay?
Then if you're not able to do that,
30 seconds to respond.
If you're not able to do that, then the problem of evil is not a defeater.
Can you give me 30 seconds to respond?
Out of curiosity, I want to see if Pine Creek can actually respond for greater than 2 sentences. So go ahead, Pine Creek.
Yeah. So the real issue for your particular God that we're talking about, the God of the Bible, is that it's a desired versus not desired type contradiction. God desired to create, knowing with 100% certainty that what He would create would lead to something He doesn't desire, meaning sin. God hates sin. I think every Christian agrees with that. God hates it. He doesn't want sin. However, He wants to create something that He knows with 100% certainty will lead to sin. He doesn't need people. He doesn't need worship. If He's all powerful, all self-sufficient, and can see the future with perfect certainty, which some Christians might disagree with, then you have a problem of evil for this particular type of God. There, I'm done.
So again, in order for the problem of evil to be a defeater, you're going to have to show that the evil that God allows is going to overwhelm His overall plan of goodness and salvation, and you haven't been able to do that. You've just restated the same thing, but you haven't actually showed how it's a defeater. So God created a bunch of people, and it is His desire that that everyone be saved, but He gives you free will to reject Him, and so He understands that not everyone is going to enter into eternity with Him. So that's fine. You're going to have to show that all of those things considered, that those things are, that somehow the evil is going to overwhelm his overall plan of goodness and salvation.
Well, let me try to show it.
Been able to show that.
Let me try to show it. I'll try to show it if you can answer my questions with yes or no. Are you willing to do that?
Well, I'm asking. It's your position that there is no God, right?
Are you willing to answer the question, these yes or no questions? They're actually very simple questions. Do you believe God can see the future? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do you believe God hates sin? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do you believe that God doesn't need people to worship him? Yes or no?
Yes.
Do you believe that God could have chosen not to create?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe there would be no one in hell, if you believe in that, if God didn't create?
Hell wasn't made for humans.
Would there be anybody in hell if God never created anything?
Yeah, there would be a third of the angels.
Angels are created things.
Yeah, so they're not humans.
So basically, every answer you gave said God doesn't want sin. He hates sin. He knew sin would happen if he created. He doesn't need to create. There's nothing but downside for him. Because by creating...
Wait. Where'd you get that from?
Because
where'd you get that? Where'd you get there's nothing but downside from him? Where'd you get that? Again, Pine Creek. All those things. Hold on. All of those things.
He's not going to let you.
No, all of those things. Well, no, I did. I just answered a bunch of questions in a row from you. But then all of a sudden you tried to sneak in some things saying that there's nothing but downside. Again, all of those things allowed, Pine Creek. You're still going to need to show how somehow the evil that God allows, God's big cosmic meanness, somehow overwhelms his plan of goodness.
Imagine a world with God alone.
Are you able to do that?
I'm going to try. You're going to let me try.
Hang on, gentlemen, before we continue on, Pine Creek, you need to answer the question that was raised and then continue on.
What's the question, please?
So I've asked one question multiple times and I still haven't got an answer. I've answered multiple of your questions now.
Can you
in rapid fire succession? Yes and no, just as you asked.
Can you remind me what the question is?
Yeah. Are you able to show that somehow this evil that God allows overwhelms his plan of goodness and salvation? Are you able to do that?
Not to you. And here's why, because there's nothing I can say to change your mind. But I just want you to help understand.
So you would be able to convince, hold on, just for clarification. So you would be able to convince an atheist, but not a Christian. Is that more accurate?
I think there's theists.
So you're going to find Christians that are going to say that Satan wins? Where'd you get that from?
I never even mentioned Satan in the last.
Is there a passage that says Satan wins? Okay.
So here's the thing.
Even then, Pine Creek is a global atheist. So like all of this is just another one of Pine Creek's sleaze tactics to avoid answering for his actual position, which is that there is no God, right?
I don't even think he's a global atheist.
Yeah, he is. Last time I asked him, he espoused global atheism, which is the denial of all gods.
He's agnostic towards certain conceptions.
No, we went over this actually last time I talked to him. Okay, he believes that there is no God. I asked him if he can rationally defend his atheism that he holds to, and he said he couldn't. And so that's where we're at right now.
How does that imply global atheism?
Let me please let me finish. Unless he's had an epiphany in the past month or two that I talked to him, then I think he's still in the same irrational quandary that he's been in this whole time.
Can we stay on the problem of evil for just like 5 minutes here? So redefine. You asked me a question about can I show or demonstrate or prove or whatever that that
would you like me to ask you the question again?
And yeah, I've heard the question, but let me try to do it with you. It's going to be futile.
What did I ask?
You asked me, can I show that there isn't a reason, a greater good that offsets this evil? I paraphrased you, but that's basically it, right?
Are you able to show that the evil that God allows, overwhelms his plan of goodness and salvation? Are you able to do that?
But Pine Creek, there's something incoherent about the question. The reason is that if God needs evil to accomplish some greater aim, that means he should do it, which means it's just not real. In what sense would it be evil? So it's actually, there's just a flaw in the question itself.
Yeah, but
So
I'm still going to work with them and try to
Okay.
For it. Just, yeah. So imagine a world of just God alone before he created anything. Can you imagine that redefined? Just God in 3 persons. You with me? Okay.
No, well, I can't really imagine it, but I'll try.
Is there any sin?
No.
Okay. Now imagine God with creation.
Yeah. You understand that I've already acknowledged that God allows these bad things to happen, right?
Just humor me and just okay. So,
but you understand that, right?
Yes.
I've already acknowledged and allowed that God allows evil things to happen.
Yes, I understand. But okay. Here's my question. So you've imagined a world with just God alone before creation, and now you're imagining a world with God and creation in it. Now here's my question for you. Which world is better in your view?
The world that God created.
The world with sin is better than the world without sin?
Yeah, this current world with sin. Because this world, hold on, you should know this. This world is the passage into the next where there is no sin.
I'm curious if other Christians agree with his answer.
Without this world, you're going to have to show me like a coherent path to salvation.
But do you realize what you just said?
There's just no free will in heaven.
You said a world with sin is better than a world without sin.
And that's where I would disagree. That's where I would disagree with the critique of the fella that John was just going over. I could be wrong. This is more of an internal question, but I don't believe that we will have the same full free will that we have here on earth in heaven, right? Because it is our flesh that causes us to sin, and so when we pray that God would remove that part from us. So why would I want that part of me that causes me to do those negative things with my free will? Why would I want that in heaven?
But I want to just make sure.
I pray that I don't have that. But the only way that that's going to happen is if there's a world here where I can use my free will from my position anyway.
I have to congratulate.
Where I can surrender.
I have to congratulate you because you've answered that question differently than most theists I've talked to. Most theists won't even touch that question with a 7-foot pole because they know where it's going. But you answered it, and I appreciate it. You said a world with sin is better than a world without. Did I hear you correctly?
Hey, Pine Creek, questions are not arguments.
I'm not talking to redefine.
You're misrepresenting me. But yeah. But I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for you, just so everyone sees what Pine Creek is doing is he's just doing another red herring where I've asked him to show me, just simply show me how the evil that God allows. I'm granting you that God allows evil, okay? That's fine. But you're going to have to show me how that the evil that God allows somehow overwhelms his overall plan of goodness and salvation. And you haven't been able to do that. You've given me some emotion, right? You've questioned me, you've replied emotionally, but you haven't been able to give me a defeater for God. So I'll have to ask you again, Pine Creek. I have to ask you again.
I got the answer.
How is it that there is no God? How is it?
Your God is real. He exists
I'm
because
waiting.
he wanted sin, apparently.
Pine Creek, do you have anything that is more than like recklessly and emotional, like a teenage girl who just got grounded for the weekend?
Pine Creek, how did you come to the conclusion that God wants sin out of all that conversation? How did you come to that conclusion?
In Redefines worldview, it's because he created.
No, okay, if the end, okay, if I'm going to operate from Redefine's position, right, which I'm pretty sure he regurgitated multiple times, was that the end outcome is a world without sin, is the end outcome, not the current position that from the current frame of reference, but the end outcome is that. So if that is the end outcome, how is it that God wants sin to exist if the end outcome is no sin?
No, if he wants the world to exist with sin, then he wants it.
No, if he allows it to exist, but ultimately the ultimate end conclusion is that the sin is eradicated.
And that doesn't change that sin exists.
No, I didn't say it did. I asked you a very specific question about God wanting there to be sin versus allowing there to be sin. Because the clear delineation you made was that God wants there to be sin. That was what you stated.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So is it your position that allowing something is the same as wanting something?
If you are an omni-God, yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Allowing something is the same as wanting.
How does that follow? How does that
for
follow?
God, yes. Not for us, but for God.
How does that follow?
Okay, it follows because if God is not surprised by his creation and he desires to create knowing exactly what will happen, there's no difference between allowing and wanting.
Yeah, it's all intentional.
You just repeated the same claim you made earlier without actually.
No, he explained it. The point is that God actualizes all events and he knows about all events, right? So that means he's responsible for every event.
People who want certain people who allow certain things know the outcome as well. He has not actually presented a argument for how you determined it to be the case that wanting something, knowing the outcome, of course, that allowing something, because if you're allowing something, you know the outcome as well, is equivalent to wanting it to happen. You didn't present that argument.
Yeah, allowing is the same as wanting if you're omniscient.
Okay, how does that follow?
Because everything that you allow, you'll know with 100% certainty the result.
Okay, so if something happens to
how does that change my mental
state?
If something happens, want versus allow, that makes no sense.
It doesn't change it exactly because
not your mental state. We're talking about an omni-God.
Listen, there are things you allow, Pine Creek, that you have full knowledge of the consequences of that I'm sure you don't want to happen. Okay, so yeah, being omniscient is not a relevant factor.
Can you give me an example?
Omniscience. Listen, omniscience. Literally, when you say you allow something, the implication is that there is a knowledge that is present. That's what because otherwise you're not allowing anything. You don't allow things that you're not conscious of, right? That you don't have a knowledge of the consequences of. So omniscience is not going to get you. It's not a symmetry breaker, right? You're just addressing the exact same scenario.
No, I think it is.
No, it is not. No, it's not, because when you say you're allowing something, when you listen, when you say you're allowing something or that you're tolerating something or any of the synonyms for allow or tolerate, the implication, like, it wouldn't be toleration, it wouldn't be allowing something if you did not know what you're allowing and the consequences of that. It would not be classified as being tolerated. You don't tolerate. For example, I'm not tolerating an event that's happening halfway across the world that I have no knowledge of. I'm not tolerating because I don't have any mental access to it. So appealing to your knowledge is not going to get you out of the situation. It's not an argument, right? It's not a symmetry breaker between God and regular human beings who allow things. Okay, it's not a symmetry breaker appealing to God's omniscience. It's perfectly consistent. Okay, does saying that you tolerate or allow something imply that you have a knowledge of what you're allowing?
For me, no.
Okay, then you have no idea what so that means you tolerate the billions and trillions of things that happen.
But I can't see the future.
Knowledge of? No, listen. I'm going to just pull up the dictionary definition. I'm willing to bet you that if I look up tolerate,
I agree, right now, J. Robin. I agree with you that there's going
to be some implication about knowledge. I agree,
right now, J. Robin. If you're talking about humans, but we're not talking about humans here. We're talking about God.
Okay, to allow the existence, occurrence, or practice of something.
J. Robin, you're not listening.
That's something that one does not necessarily like.
He doesn't really listen though.
Without interference. To accept and endure something with forbearance. So yes, you do know what's going on. You do have mental access to the state of affairs. So there is a knowledge factor when it comes to tolerating.
Okay, so God knows about everything that happens. Okay.
Okay, so the question on the table is still outstanding. But how does it follow that tolerating something is equal to wanting it to happen?
Because you could have chosen because you could have chosen to do otherwise. That's why. It's because if I'm trying to think.
Okay, so that means that the negative things that people tolerate, that means they want it to happen. Like, is that something you're going to say right now? No, there are things that people tolerate.
Jay Brown, listen to me very carefully, and I think
Pine Creek. I give you an example of I give you an example of a child riding a bicycle for the first time, and you take the training wheels off, and you don't want that child to fall, but you know they're going to.
Well, if your plan is to save
hold on. But there's a bigger plan that you have in mind, and that plan is that child being able to freely ride that bicycle.
Okay, that's a great example.
So you will allow some of these things to happen, even though they might hurt your feelings. So again, Pine Creek, you're going to need to show me that these bad things that happen somehow overwhelm God's plan of goodness, and you haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, you don't have to keep saying all that stuff.
Well, I'm waiting. We're all waiting.
So
the chat's waiting.
I'm
the stage is waiting. I'm waiting.
Sam.
I've only asked one question. I'm
going
still
to use
waiting.
your bicycle example to answer your question. So let's say I'm a parent and I really, really, really don't want my child to fall. Okay. And if I know with 100% certainty, if I take those training wheels off, that child will fall, but I really don't want my child to fall. So by taking off the training wheels, me as a parent who knows the future that they're going to fall, basically I want the child to fall because I know that if I take the training wheels off, that child will fall.
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Okay,
Anyone
hang on.
who's had a
Sam,
child and
Sam,
taught that child
Sam,
how to ride a
Sam,
bike knows
Sam.
how stupid that is.
I know. Sam, hang on.
Sorry.
Pine Creek. If, as the parent, even if the child falls, it's not going to kill them. And they're going to get up and heal, and they will learn, and then they will, from that experience, will be able to ride the bike without the training wheels. Are you suggesting you should never take off the training wheels?
No.
Okay, then what is your freaking point about God allowing something, wanting something? As the parent, you don't. Hey, bubble silence. As the parent, you don't want your kid to fall off and scrape their knee and deal with the pain and all that kind of stuff. You don't want that to happen. However, and this is the whole point that's been being made about the overarching is the overall good greater than, right? In terms of the allowance of something is, yes, you fell off your bike and you scraped your knee, but then you healed and then you had even greater joy from riding around on your bike and jumping. I'm to myself, right? I didn't want training wheels as a kid. And when I got my bike, I adamantly argued that I did not need training wheels and I was going to go learn how to do it. So Dad do. He took me out in the grass and we rode and held me.
Yeah,
and
I get the analogy. You don't have to go into this.
Pine Creek, sometimes things clearly be dumbed down for you because you either categorically reject concepts or seem incapable of comprehending them. So in the context of all this, should my father have put training wheels on or allowed me, even though I did crash many times and I would ride around the grass and I drive over to bushes and hop off the bike to keep from doing myself as much. Should my father have put training wheels on, because that would have been the safer way for me to learn how to ride the bike.
Initially, yes, but later, no.
But here, let me ask a question, because in the Bible, God is doing this for salvation, not because he wants to see God's free will. So in the bike example, it would be the dad letting the child fall because he wants to come in and save the child, heal the wounds, etc. Not because he wants to see the child be happy in his bike.
Yeah, we can use an analogy of a commander sending his troops into war, knowing that some of them are going to perish, but the hope is that there will be victory, and maybe this commander knows that there will be victory, and there will be some that survive.
Let's use that example.
Okay.
Let's imagine you have a commander.
Okay, so you have a
doesn't
goal,
want anyone to perish,
and you have a greater good. You have a commander who doesn't want any of his people to die, but he knows that some of them will. Okay. So again, you're going to have to show, Pine Creek, you're going to have to show that this evil somehow overwhelms God's plan of salvation and goodness.
Yeah,
and I'm still waiting for you to show that.
And then if you can't show it, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Now redefine, let's use your commander analogy. If the commander truly, truly doesn't want any of his army guys to perish,
then he'll buy them ice creams and send them home.
He's not going to put them out in battle, right?
Is that your answer? He'll just buy him ice cream and he'll send them all home, and then he wouldn't be a cosmic meanie.
I appreciate you, Sam. I appreciate you because you already have admitted
like this is how bad. This is how bad your position is right here, Pine Creek. You don't get it intentionally.
Let him answer.
Yeah. So with the commander thing, the perishing in battle is the same as perishing due to sin and losing eternal life. That's the analogy. Now, if God doesn't want anyone to perish, truly, not one, then God would never send, or the commander would never send anybody out to battle. But he did send people out to battle, which means he's okay with some perishing. There's the contradiction. Yeah. Wants to perish, doesn't want to perish.
Well, here.
So are you? So here. Hold on, and this is where this is the whole point where Why Pine Creek's just thrown out another red herring? Because your position that you were arguing earlier is that the commander, because the commander does send these people out to war, that he actually wants them to die. Okay,
that's got to be
we're
true.
Saying no. We're saying no. That's not the case. Okay, he knows he wants them all to survive. He knows that they're not all going to, but there is a greater good. Okay, so you're trying to say that this commander wants them to die because he knows that some of them will.
That just means he intentionally. That means that it's intentional.
Hold on.
Right?
Hold on. I think even you can get this, Danny.
It's necessary.
I think that
you're missing something. I'm pointing it out.
I think that even you can get this, Danny. So the commander's going to send these people out. He knows they're not all going to make it. He wants them all to. He's like, man, I want all of you guys to make it, but some of you aren't.
It's necessary.
Okay? But some of you are.
I have an analogy.
Yeah, no. I want to point out why that does not work. Right. The point is that there are two competing desires. God, or the commander rather, does not want his soldiers to perish on one hand, right? On the other hand, he does want them to perish for the greater good, for winning the war or whatever, right? And so the idea is that his desire to have them perish to win the war is greater than his desire to not let them perish and lose the war. So it does imply that when he sends his troops out to war, he wants them to die for the greater good of winning the war. Otherwise, it's just not intentional. And
the salvation, yes.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that he wants them to.
Well, he needs them to die.
I think that is a distinction that you are misrepresenting. Okay?
Look,
I don't think that you're going to find. Hold on. I don't think that you're going to find a commander that's going to say, "I want you guys to die." He's going to say, "I don't want you guys to die, but some of you are going to die for the greater good."
Yeah, that doesn't show anything. So. You will get a commander to say that it was necessary for those deaths to win the war. In that sense, he wanted them to die to win the war, right? That just means it was intentional.
No, he didn't want them to die.
It's necessary.
Was it intentional or not intentional?
The way that you are phrasing that intentionally has an underlying implication that I am rejecting. Okay?
Was it intentional
so
or
you
can go ahead and accurately represent.
We're going to go around this. This will be a never-ending circle. So we're going to put a different topic up to create a dumpster fire here. Okay, so for Pine Creek, Danny, and Jackson, if and I know that Pine Creek, the whole premise of eternal life is he doesn't like it, but it's neither here nor there. The if there is no eternal death, regardless of whether or not you believe, don't believe, whatever, does that completely negate your problem, the problem of evil and God being a meanie and such?
If you're talking to me, I just got back. I had to tuck my son in.
If there is no eternal damnation, right? There is no eternal death. Ultimately, even when you die in this world, you're still alive, and in the next world is perfect and such. If that is the case, and this is nothing but a training ground and such to learn about perspective and all that crap. If that's the case, then are all your arguments defeated?
Mostly, I would say mostly. I'd admit. Or was that to me? Sorry.
Right. You guys can all answer.
I think for the logical problem of evil, it doesn't change anything.
It makes it better, though. I'll admit that. If you're a universalist Christian, the problem of evil, in my view, is way, 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 way less.
I didn't ask about the universalist Christian. I was asking about you guys. So when you die, you wake up in a perfect world, and all of this was nothing but a training ground. It's basically your infancy from an eternal perspective. Is your consistent whining and being angry at God for allowing some bad things to happen in a very finite stage that has no real significance from the eternal perspective, would that negate your rejection or the justification of your rejection?
Not entirely, no.
Okay, please expand as to the why not.
Because the problem of evil is a critique against a certain type of God, and I'm saying that this God would have no need to create, and by desiring to create, knowing perfectly what would happen, something that he hates. Like he even hates it when a woman's raped, right? We're not talking about heaven or hell. He doesn't want women to be raped. Unless maybe you're a Christian who does think that. I don't know. But by not creating, no women are raped. By not creating, no children are starved to death. By not creating, there's no tsunamis killing. Like the pain and suffering here on planet Earth.
Pine Creek, let me clarify this one more time, okay? Because again, the very juvenile perspective that you constantly bring is just really obnoxious, okay? So again, let me repeat myself, okay? All of, and I'll put it again from an analogy standpoint, all of the stuff that you're talking about, everything that encompasses the problem of evil, right, is the equivalent of falling off your bike and scraping your knee, okay? From the eternal perspective, again, right? You're immortal. You are, all of this crap is going to have, it's the same significance of, oh, I fell off my bike when I was a little kid. Now when you look back as an adult, you kind of crack up about the, how worked up you got about that kind of stuff.
Let's say we were like in a video game. This is all just a video game.
But it would help to distinguish between logical and evidential problem of evil, because the logical problem of evil, even if one molecule is off in the world, that type of God doesn't exist. But the evidential problem of evil will allow for some, okay, if you scrape your knee, yeah, that's not good, but doesn't mean God doesn't exist. So like there's two problems of evil here.
Yeah. And I think LPP was talking about the evidential, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, if it's evidential, then I agree with Pine Creek. It makes it better. Just, like there's less suffering, there's less evil. And if there's less evil, the God hypothesis is more probable. But on the logical problem of evil, even a scrape on the knee, if that is considered the only evil thing that happens in all eternity, the perfect God still does not exist.
Yeah, I think that's just a bunch of nonsense, because again, I'm just asking you, okay, I could even ask you this. I could say, like, if it's the case that God creates vessels specifically for destruction, okay, let's say that God creates humans just for destruction, part of His overall plan, okay. That's not a defeater for God.
Did he want that? The whole question is whether
even on like the hard Calvinistic position, where God creates, where God creates these things for evil, for destruction, creates a bunch of people just for destruction. Okay, so now you have this. So now you have this cosmic meanie scenario. Okay, my question still stands. You're going to have to show that somehow these bad things overwhelm God's overall plan of goodness and salvation. And so Pine Creek can say, oh, let me give you this big, long, emotional grandstand about all these things that hurt my feelings that I don't like. That's fine, Pine Creek. I'm allowing all of those things. I'm saying let's take all of those things so you can spare us the big old list of things that hurt your feelings. Okay? So granting all of those things, you're going to have to show that the evil somehow overwhelms God's overall plan of salvation and goodness. And all I hear from you guys is just emotions.
Yeah,
like a teen. If you ever try to ground a teenage girl that has plans for the weekends, whoo, that's all I'm getting.
That doesn't make any sense because I don't have a daughter, so.
Yeah.
So basically,
no, I mean, the whole problem is whether God wanted to do what He did, right? And all things being equal. And that's basically, if God wanted sin, there's no problem of evil.
Yeah.
So again,
there's no problem.
You guys aren't focusing, okay? Because if you listen to the question that I ask, okay, I say God's plan, God's overall plan.
Right. Was God's plan for
and
sin
that plan would encompass all of these complaints that you have, all of these accusations of being a meanie and hurting your feelings, okay? That's all part of God's plan. I'm allowing all of these things that really bother you, okay, that keep you up all night, okay? And some of them, yeah, they're hard to, okay, I'm not trying to dumb down the evil. I'm granting all of that. You're still going to have to show that that these things, okay, these evils, somehow overwhelm God's overall plan of goodness and salvation. Plan.
The whole problem here is that exactly what we were talking about earlier, the difference between wanting and allowing, and I think that's where we disagree.
Here's the thing.
I see it the same as for God.
Hey, time out, guys. Mitch, you're backstage. I can't let you in unless you connect at least your microphone. You've been sitting in the back door for a while. Go ahead and connect your mic, or if you're on a computer, don't have a microphone, hop on your phone, and you can connect that way. All right, go ahead.
Hey, Bubble.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to accurately represent the Bible, then you need to understand that God makes it clear that He wants none to perish.
Okay. The reason you need a sin is because without sin there's no salvation. But you can't have the consequences of having free will.
No, that's not accurate.
Yes. Well, look. If let's say there was no sin, let's say God,
you can have salvation without sin.
No, I just think the way that you phrased that, again, maybe I'm being nitpicky on what you're saying, but
okay, look.
So here, let me just give you the problem in a nutshell. Okay, God is the ultimate righteous being. Okay, so He can't. It's like trying to mix oil and water; they're not going to mix. So one sin is going to disqualify you. So the problem is that we've all been separated. Okay. We've all been separated because we've all done at least one thing. Now the problem is, how are we going to get back? How can we dwell with a God who is just totally righteous and holy? Okay, we're not going to do that. Because of our sin, we need a Savior. That's the problem on the Christian worldview, okay? So God allows us to exercise our free will and do things that are not in accordance to what He would have us to do, His desires.
Okay, look, if this is a video game, akin to a video game, and in order to have salvation, you need to have sin. So mankind needs to sin, because if you don't have sin, there's no reason for salvation.
You've got it backwards. That's what I'm trying to say.
So
because we sin, we need salvation.
But that's the thing. We need to sin in order for God to come in and do the salvation.
We have sin.
Yeah.
We don't need to sin. We don't need to sin to get salvation. We have sinned. We have sinned.
Yes, we have
Jones
sinned.
said the opposite today, Sam. If you I know you guys did watch the whole thing, right? He said the causal arrows in the other direction. That it was God's plan before the foundation of the universe for the redemption through Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I can explain that too, through free will.
So he says the causal relationship.
I can explain that to you, Pine Creek, even though you should know because you were a pastor for a while, so you say.
I was never a pastor. Who told you that?
I thought you worked at a church or something like that, didn't you?
I was never a pastor, but I played on stage my saxophone.
Okay.
But you know what I'm talking about, right?
Maybe you should have spent more time on the other side of the pastor then.
Like you heard Clay Jones say that Christians are better off because sin entered the world. Because without sin, Jesus couldn't come, and Jesus's coming was planned.
No. That's no.
He's just saying what Clay Jones.
If there was no sin, then Jesus would not have needed to come.
Yes, right. But that's part of the grand plan.
Problem is,
but God wanted Jesus to come to save the world, so He had to have sin.
You guys are putting the cart before the horse, and you're like,
this is what Clay Jones was saying today.
Hold on, I have this straw man. I need you to accept it because somebody said something. You have to accept the straw man because that's my best refute is a straw man. So please.
No, look at the title of the stream. Look at the title of the stream. It's about Clay Jones's view on the problem of evil, right? Yes. And Pine Creek's just pointing out.
Well, it was a review. Originally, it was a review, but we've already. Jones. But John's already done that review, so now we're talking about the problem of evil that you guys are misrepresenting right now.
Well,
but if you want to actually address our position, that's fine. I'll be happy to explain it to you. But if you just want to say, "Hey, I'm going to make this thing up over here and attack it," then that's fine.
Do you agree or disagree with Clay Jones?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too.
I'm not sure if you understand. If you understand him and I don't, then perhaps I do disagree.
Okay, I think you actually do disagree with
him. And let me explain why I think that you don't understand, okay? Because God, an all-knowing God, understands what we are going to choose beforehand. So before I was even placed on this earth, God knew my life, knew the decisions that I was going to make. And that's how you can have a type of election. Now, the Calvinists might interpret that a little bit differently, but I think that we have more in common at that point than we disagree on.
I think you're just missing what Pine Creek is saying. Okay, what do you think Pine Creek is saying?
Yeah, perhaps I am. Go ahead. Be clear, Pine Creek.
Well, I think you disagree with Clay Jones, but what Clay Jones was saying that before humans even existed, God had a plan of salvation. So he didn't say it this way, but I'm paraphrasing Clay Jones. He's saying that.
Well, I'd rather you not do that.
Well, I don't have the transcript up, so I can't quote him. But he's basically saying that the causal arrow is that it starts with God's plan, and then sin enters. It's not that sin entered and then God's plan takes place. No, the whole idea of sin entering the garden.
I think that's a misrepresentation. You're saying the way that you're
Clay
phrasing
Jones is
it
saying
is,
this.
well, the way that you are phrasing it, and why I think that you are either intentionally misrepresenting or maybe unintentionally misrepresenting.
Well, let's ask
okay?
LPP.
But God had a plan. The way that you're phrasing it, you're saying, well, God had the plan, and then all of a sudden, whoops, oh my goodness, I didn't realize, here's sin. I don't think that's what he was saying.
No, but
okay, so I would rather, sir, I would argue that the point that Clay Jones was making is that God recognized the necessity for the plan to be for Christ, based on, from an omniscience perspective, what the end outcome was going to be by giving man free will.
Right.
Is that I know the end outcome of this, therefore I must, in terms of the fall of man, therefore I must account for this from the beginning. And this is where the atheists who don't want to allow for eternal omniscience and the God not being bound by the linear frame of reference that we have such a hard time with this.
I have the transcript up here. This is what Clay Jones actually said. From the beginning of the ages, it was always expected that Adam was going to sin, because the Lord wanted to have Jesus come to die for the sins of the world. If you're a Christian, you and I Christians are actually in a better state today than we would have been if Adam and Eve never have eaten from the tree. We are better off than we were if Adam and Eve had never ate from the tree. I'm quoting Clay Jones. He's clearly putting a causal relationship that this was God's plan, and that God, in quotes, wanted sin to enter the world so he could save people.
I get how you're getting where you're coming from, Pine Creek. However, if you had paid attention at the beginning, he directly states that the free will problem and the problem of evil were accounted for in relation to Plantinga's argument. So I would suggest that if that is already established, then the point that Sam is making is the interpretation that you get from a contextual aspect of what you just read. Since way previous in the conversation, Jones has already set that up. And I'm pretty sure in his book, he goes into much greater detail about this and would not, the point you're making was substantiated by his own publications.
So it's the plan is salvation, right?
But so in God's omniscience, he understands what we are going to do before we do. Okay, he understands that some of us are going to choose him, and he understands that some of us are going to reject him. Okay, your own rejection from the atheist on the stage right now is evidence of this free will. But that's fine. God's going to allow that. He's going to grant you your wish of eternal separation. Not because he's a cosmic meanie, because he's going to give you guys what you want. You have a free choice. You can repent. I wish you would. But you don't want to do that. You can stop running from the God you know, and we all wish you would. And we'll pray for that tonight also. But you guys don't want to do that. So you guys are going to exercise your free will. But the Christians, we're also going to make a choice. We're going to exercise our free will. And we're going to ask God that he remove that fleshly part of us that we can inherit the afterlife without this sin, without this flesh. And that's why I don't believe that we are going to have the same creaturely free will. I think we will have more of a creator type free will, because we will not have, it's my position that we won't have the ability to do these horrible things or be tempted by these horrible things.
Sam, are you a Calvinist?
Because we won't have the flesh.
Do you lean Calvinism or no?
Sam, with free will comes sin.
I don't lean Calvinism. But here's the thing. If it's the case that Calvinism is true, then what? What follows from that?
There's no free will.
Right. I'm a free will.
So
when I start talking about free will, you should know that I'm not a Calvinist.
Okay, look, you need free will in order to have sin. Free will let me think about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You need free will in order to have sin. But
Sorry,
you also
Sam,
need free will to freely choose God and to have love, right? Because if not for free will, then God made a bunch of robots. There's a few problems that I have with Calvinism. However, if we got a good Calvinist up here that really could represent their position, they would be able to answer all of these questions differently, but equally sufficiently.
This might be changing. This might
you
be
still don't
changing
have
the
a
topic.
defeater, even if I was a Calvinist.
This might be
which,
changing
again,
the
I'm
topic
not.
slightly, but you said something interesting earlier.
It
Sam,
is
that
it is a defeater for a Calvinist. If you're a Calvinist, that means there's no free will, and if there's no free will, there's no sin, and if there's no sin, there's no salvation because
there's
salvation.
No, that doesn't follow from that.
Yes, it does. Because
you don't know.
Salvation it's dependent upon sin, and there is no sin without
don't
free
know what
will.
you're talking about. A Calvinist would not be acknowledging free will. Okay, I do. That should be very clear and obvious by now. A Calvinist would not answer the same way as me. They would answer differently, but they would answer these things sufficiently. Okay? I'm only saying this because I've heard these Calvinists defend their position, and some of them do a very good job of doing it. I disagree with them.
And the Calvinist uses creaturely free will versus other types of free will. Like there's many ways around it from the Calvinist.
Well, I'll use that too.
Yeah.
But again, you cannot pretend that God has the same type of free will that the creation does,
Yeah,
that the creatures do. Okay,
Yeah, but
there are things that God can do that we cannot do. He can freely choose to do things that we simply can't do. But we can also freely choose to do sin, and God can't do that. There's a big difference between the creator and the creature. So maybe one of you guys would actually accurately represent our position. Okay, but we're still waiting for the atheist to give us a defeater.
That whole account is unintelligible. Because
Sam,
but go ahead.
Yeah, Sam, you said something interesting earlier.
That whole account is
why are you going to heaven, Sam?
Yeah, we're not talking about that right now.
Well, no,
I'm waiting for a rational argument from an atheist of why there is no God.
The reason why I bring that up,
I've talked about that with you before, Pine Creek.
This is on the topic of free will, and so tell me if I'm wrong, but you would say that you're going to heaven because you've exercised your free will to repent of your sins, turn towards God, accept the gift of grace,
or
a gift of salvation. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And the reason why a guy like me wouldn't go to heaven is because I haven't done those things.
No, I don't know. You know, Pine Creek, I've spent a lot of time actually thinking about you and your somewhat unique position and praying for you. And I will continue to do that because you've unacknowledged, you have challenged me actually on a few things unknowingly, okay? Because it could be the case, Pine Creek. It could be the case that you are saved. Could be.
Could it be the case that you're not?
It could be. No, it could be the case. It could
Why
be
could it be the case
that
I'm
you
saved,
had,
but not the case you're not?
Right.
How does
I'll be happy to explain that. Okay. It could be the case that you did have a genuine come to Jesus moment, and you're in a backslidden state of rebellion. And even though you're running your mouth all over YouTube like an atheist idiot, it could be that that's not the case. It could be that you are actually saved. Okay, and could be that you'll die and God will be like, dude, you're an idiot. You lost all of your rewards, but you're still going to enter into heaven. That could be the case. Or it could be the case that you never were saved. Okay.
Okay,
but for me, no, I did have a come to Jesus moment. I know that. Okay. And I'll be happy to talk about that on another time. Okay.
Yeah, another time.
I am not concerned with my salvation. But no, I have wondered that about you. What is it, Pine Creek? Did you have a come to Jesus moment?
Yes.
Are you just absconding from the God you know right now?
No, I don't believe that God exists.
Well, that's what you say, right?
Yeah, that's what I say.
Yeah, it could be.
So, but where I was going with this on the topic of free will is that really free will is so tremendously powerful, isn't it? Like you can actually decide your eternal destiny based on free will. Is that correct?
Well,
just
yes.
walk into the trap.
Yes,
Sam.
I
Just walk
suppose.
right in.
Suppose that would be accurate. I don't think it's that. I think there's a bit more to it. I think that there's a guiding of the Holy Spirit, and I believe that is also open to everyone, even the atheist. Especially those that are in the room right now listening to this conversation, and they're like, "Well, maybe there's something to this, but I'm going to continue to suppress that truth." Right? So no, there's a guide. There's a guiding.
Though, yes.
Yeah, there's a guiding of the Holy Spirit. Now you might have that guiding, and you might reject that.
So my question is, on this topic of free will and that powerful free will thing we have.
Do you not have free will, Pine Creek? Are you not in a state of rejection
can I ask
right now?
My question? Oh my goodness.
Well, you ask it mockingly, right? I'm waiting for you to be serious. I'm still waiting for a defeater.
Sam,
what does
just
it
let
matter?
him.
It's like, since you have free will and it's so powerful because it can determine your eternal destiny. My question is this: where's the grace in this?
Explain what you mean.
Well, grace is like there's nothing you can do to inherit eternal life, that lest any man should boast. It's all God, not you.
It's faith alone. Sure.
It's faith alone, and faith is a gift from God. But you just said that you had the free will to choose your eternal destiny by accepting the gift, by repenting, and so forth. How do you consolidate those two things? Like, I could say, Sam, you did an amazing, wonderful thing. It's unbelievable what you've done, Sam, to accept the gift that's been offered to you. You should boast, Sam, because you accepted and I didn't.
Well, no, because I don't look at the acceptance. I don't look at that free will choice as a type of works. Because hold on, let me answer your question. Because there is not a single thing work-wise that I am able to do, there's absolutely nothing that I can boast in. What can I boast in? What have I done? I've done nothing but accept.
Sam.
I've done nothing but accept a gift that was offered to me.
And you turn from your sins and you take up your cross. You pray for people. You follow.
Hang on, Pine Creek. Is it your position that recognition of wrongdoing is something to be like boastful of? Like, do you actually? Is that something you would do?
I think recognition that you're wrong is something you can take pride in.
Yeah, it's actually pretty hard to do for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very difficult to admit you're wrong and you need to turn from your ways. And I congratulate Sam for doing it.
But that's not my point. My point is it the thing that a normal person is going to run around being boastful of?
Well, if you mean like, hey, everybody, look what I did. No, of course, but I'm saying that.
Okay, cool. Then the extrapolation of the point you're making is ridiculous.
No. What Pine Creek is saying is that it's praiseworthy.
Yes.
No. So hold on. Let me push back a little bit. So Pine Creek's mocking. I'm sure it's very obvious
He's
to
not
everyone
mocking
listening in this chat. But so Pine Creek, I wonder, because I've answered many of your questions, and I don't want to deviate too far, but in another stream, I remember you were, I forget who it was, but I caught you in another stream, and you were complaining in the chat how God was a cosmic meanie because he did all of these things in the Bible. And I asked you if you had a moral standard without borrowing from the biblical worldview, if you had a moral standard that is sufficient to substantiate your accusations.
We're changing
that God
topics. Do you think
is
it's
a cosmic,
praiseworthy?
Hold on.
You're just changing
So
topics.
I asked you if you had, and this is why Danny wants to interrupt, because he knows.
Yeah, I'm interrupting because you're interrupting the conversation.
The problem of
You're just
evil,
interrupting.
the problem of evil also demands a response from the atheist. So
No, it
when I
doesn't. It's an
asked the
internal
atheist
critique.
in the
It's an
room,
internal
do you have, so let's just assume for the sake of my question that there is no God. Now, how will the atheist respond to the problem of evil in a world where there is no God?
There is
Do
no
you
problem
have
with
a
evil.
moral standard that is sufficient to substantiate even a single accusation that anything is wrong? We don't like that question, do we? It's fun to ask these questions of the Christian and point out an internal critique of our worldview. But when we try to do this critique on the atheistic worldview, Danny, can anything be wrong, Pine Creek? Is anything objectively wrong?
Well, objectively wrong makes no sense, but there are things that are wrong.
Oh, it makes no sense?
Yeah, I don't know what an
I guess in a world,
where
where there is no objective standard, then nothing could be objectively
I'm saying
wrong.
objective standards are as gibberish as googly glock, right? I don't know what they mean.
Well, from your worldview, I would agree.
From any worldview,
from the unestablished metaphysic that we're speaking of.
No, not even theism can make sense of an external reason.
Yes, from a straw man position of theism, you're right.
I don't know what that means.
Quick break, guys. So, interestingly enough, on a different topic, all 5 of the major banks in Canada have magically crashed simultaneously.
What?
Oh, hilarious!
What?
What are you talking about?
Really?
Royal Bank, BMO Bank of Montreal, CIBC Bank.
What do you mean they crashed?
Oy vey.
I'm reading this week. Bank outages at all 5 big 5 banks.
What's up? What happens in the U.S. next?
The bank has now locked everybody's funds. And, Pine Creek, aren't you from Canada? Are you?
Yeah.
Right now,
are you serious?
Hey! Stop it! Oh, sorry, I'm talking to my dog. Sorry.
I'm looking at it right. I'm looking at the report right now. It's like there's tweets about that shit all over the place.
Canada is ridiculous.
Maybe the world's finally coming to an end, just like it always wanted.
I'm wondering if this is a response to the we're gonna pull your money without a court order. I wonder if that's it says that people have been pulling money all day, and they're wondering if this is a response to basically a run on the banks.
Trudeau is going full 1984. I love it.
I gotta run, guys. God bless you. And, I'll see you guys next time.
Have a good night, Iger.
Night, Iger.
Peace.
Later, gamer.
I'm not seeing anything from like major newspapers or anything.
Yeah, I got an article about freezing funds from particular protesters, but I wonder what you're seeing.
Also, they're targeting people. That's even worse.
Because if the Canadian banks are crashed, that's going to affect the U.S.
Yeah, it's definitely going to,
Maybe it's a Russian hack, and then we're going to get hacked, and then...
It said 2 hours ago, there's a article about emergency orders aimed at freezing the funds of the quote-unquote Freedom Convoy, and now banks are scrambling within Canada to, be in accord.
This is why you get Bitcoin.
This is... What Canada did is horrible. How is that not fascism or just, seizing people's money, going into a corporation and just taking it?
What's wrong with that, Pine Creek?
That's just government in general.
But what's wrong with that? Did it violate some standard?
Sam, is there no off switch on you?
Well, I'm just wondering, because we've been talking about the Christian worldview all night, but notice how all the atheists, not you, Jackson, you cover your ears, Jackson. Notice how all the atheists just go into meltdown mode when we say, well, let's push back on your worldview. Danny perks up, gets all loud, really Pine Creek runs scared.
Sam,
where's that moral standard, guys? What's wrong with the banks taking all your money?
Hey, Sam.
Are you upset because they're just more superior and powerful than you?
Can you please?
According to naturalism, they're winning.
John,
I understand you had this amazing experience of God, and this.
I'm waiting, Pine Creek.
There's a standard of well-being unnecessary suffering. You can
tell us, Pine Creek.
You can have the standard beforehand, and when you see an action that goes against that standard, you can say it's subjectively wrong.
Who sets that standard, Pine Creek?
It's subjectively chosen, just like Christians subjectively choose.
So how? No, that's not. Well, we're talking. My position has no bearing on how you answer this question. So you don't say, "Oh, just like the Christians." Okay, that's a tu quo fallacy. We're not talking about my worldview. Now let's get back to your worldview. So it's subjectively...
on any worldview.
No, Danny. Danny. We're not talking about my worldview. We're talking about your worldview.
Mine, right?
We're talking about your worldview.
I'm saying all worldviews, including mine,
except for the Christian.
Can't make sense of an external reason, which means that what it means to say something's right or wrong is going to be stance dependent. It's going to be dependent on my goals, desires, my wants, my needs, my hopes.
So Danny decides?
What else would it mean?
That's great. Hey, look, when you're an atheist, you get to decide what's right or wrong.
No, when you're
so the bank decides to take Pine Creek's money.
No.
And poof.
No, on theism, that's just true.
We're not talking about. Well, first of all, you're wrong.
On atheism or
but
theism.
again, Danny, we're not talking about theism, right?
Yeah, we're talking about atheism or theism.
No.
Let me handle this.
I want everyone in chat to pay attention to how Danny is melting down, and he's a philosophy student. He should know better.
This is fun.
This is reductio ad absurdum on the atheistic worldview. I don't know why you keep talking about the Christian worldview.
Yes, we're talking about
the. What is it that you disagree with me, Sam, about? What do you think my claim is? Try to regurgitate my claim.
Well, I'm asking you, how is morality established from the not God worldview?
Okay, from any worldview,
no,
morality
that's not the question.
We're just talking about.
Look, you understand.
Go ahead, and then I'll correct you again, Danny.
Yes,
I'll correct you again.
Thank you. Let me go. So, on any worldview, which includes the not God worldview, I take rightness and wrongness to be about stances that people have on the world, positions, their views. Okay, that's on any worldview, including the not God worldview. That's the answer to your question.
Okay, so Danny did not answer the question, but let me correct Danny, because on all worldviews except for the biblical worldview, on the biblical worldview, we have an objective moral standard that is set by God outside of the system. So the system, within the system, we cannot change that objective moral standard. So for example, in the days of Noah, the whole world said, we don't need God's moral standard. Let's do what we want. Well, they were wrong, okay? Because there was an objective moral standard, no matter how much Danny doesn't want it to be the case. There is an objective moral standard that cannot be changed within the system. Now, Danny's answer was that morality was set by himself. Danny gets to decide what is moral for himself. So if we acknowledge what Danny just said, then the banker who took all Pine Creek's money, he's just a superior organism.
Okay, I'm probably going to be interrupted, but really quick. On any view, right, including Christianity, on Christianity, there are God's commands, there are God's desires. Those are all stance dependent, just like
those are objective. Though.
Excuse me, sir. I knew you were going to interrupt.
No.
Anyways,
because
they're
you
not objective.
Continue to talk about. We're not talking about
the
Christian
I was talking.
worldview.
Excuse me. All I'm trying to say. Excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. I knew you would interrupt. Excuse me. Anyways, the idea is that objective morality is just a synonym, or there's a synonym for it called external reasons. The point is that God's reasons are internal to himself, right? So when you say Christianity can account for external reasons for doing the good, right? That doesn't make any sense given that your morality on Christianity is a function of God's internal reasons.
Correct.
So again, now that Danny has stood up on his pedestal and given us a lecture about a question we didn't ask, we're not talking about the biblical worldview.
Also correct.
So the reason why you keep bringing that up, Danny, is because you have no answer for your own worldview, and it's a red herring. We can get back to the coherent Christian worldview if you want, and I can explain to you why what you just said fails, but I'm still waiting for a second question. My first question was, can your assertion of evil, can you show how that evil somehow overwhelms God's plan of goodness and salvation? And I haven't received an answer. My second question is, how do you establish morality on an atheistic or a not God worldview? And I'm still waiting for an answer.
I already answered that. Sam, did you not hear me? I answered that. Did you not hear me?
I couldn't, because Danny was too busy talking about the Christian worldview because he can't respond for his own worldview.
He's talking about like 30 minutes ago.
Go ahead, Pine Creek.
Well-being, unnecessary suffering is the standard.
According to who?
Me.
Okay, so you get to decide what's moral?
Nice opinion, bro. Nice
Yes.
opinion.
Okay, well, so did Hitler. Congratulations, you just justified the Holocaust. Good job, buddy.
Yeah, look, you're not going to get
one man decides what's moral. Hitler says, hey, it's according to me. Passes a bunch of laws, makes it legal. Next thing you know, the Holocaust happens, and Pine Creek slaps himself on the back.
Okay, Sam, you know I can play that game.
You want to try that
too,
again,
right?
Pine Creek?
Yeah, I can play the same game back at you.
So who establishes morality, Pine Creek?
Me.
Well, whoop, there you go. So Hitler was right, you guys. You got that?
Okay, Sam, I can play it right back at you. God was right. He killed all those Canaanites, right?
Yeah, what's wrong with that? So now you disagree with justice? Hey, Pine Creek, what would happen right now if God intervened and stopped allowing all of the evil in the world? What would that look like?
What would it look like if a God
evangelical North Korea?
A communist dictatorship.
No, you know what it would look like? An empty planet Earth.
Okay.
Whoops.
I'll take your word for it.
Whoops.
God's the only one that can run a
Sam,
communist
why is
dictatorship.
God's morality better than mine?
Because yours is subjective. Yours is arbitrary. You're not omniscient. You don't know anything.
Oh, that's a good answer because I'm not omniscient. I appreciate that answer.
So are we talking about your worldview, or are we going to get back on the Christian worldview?
No. We'll talk about mine.
Let's talk about this.
So how do we establish morality, Pine Creek? You just make something up and say it's the case? Is that how it's done?
Suffering and well-being.
Hey, Sam.
According to who?
Sam.
That's the third time.
That's arbitrary.
That's terrible what Canada did. That is evil. I was just reading that article. That is just, I cannot believe that is.
Okay,
oh man!
Outage, what does this mean? An outage is.
Trudeau's
I can't believe it.
Okay, so it
Not the
looks
same
like,
as a bank run, is it?
not necessarily. Well, I guess they were saying that there was some people were going for the bank too, but now it looks like this is the outage time. It's all taken at the same time, and all the banks had
the government did it
crashes at the same time.
So people logging on to their online, that's what this means, that they can't get online.
Yeah,
they froze their accounts. They froze the accounts of the protesters.
This is taken from a web outage tracker, and basically all at noon, they all these different banks had a crash at the same time.
Oh, noon today. Okay, but the markets really didn't react to it, though, right?
Not really.
Not until the morning.
Well, it might also not gotten much. I mean, clearly, I was Googling stuff. It took a while to find anything on it. It seems like it didn't get much media coverage. So if it didn't get much media coverage, it's also not going to affect the market too much either.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's almost midnight here, so I got to go to bed.
Pine Creek.
Thanks.
Hopefully, next time you have a good argument when we talk.
Hey Sam, I'll give you the argument T-Jump said. There's a morality particle. There's a.
Oh.
Have you heard that?
I watched the morality particle argument. That was so dumb. We will be able to measure the morality particle.
So here's the Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Anyway, when I was listening to that one, I'm like, bro, you have now reached a new level of
retardedness. That is so retarded.
He said what about particles?
He's okay. In his debate, T-Jump literally stated that there is a morality particle, and then at some point we will be able to measure it and define what morality is, and therefore there is nothing that is immaterial because there will be the discovery of a morality particle. Therefore, there is no such thing as like the immaterial abstract concept and such.
I think that would point more towards a god that there's a morality particle.
No, that would be detrimental for morality in an atheistic or a naturalistic worldview and an evolutionary worldview. Because if it's the case that morality is evolving or a product of evolution, then perhaps our idea of morality right now is wrong and slavery was right. How would we know? Only time will tell, right?
Danny, what do you think about the morality particle?
Oh, yeah, that's incoherent shit.
Yeah. Hey, Mitch, bro, I keep seeing you backstage. I want to let you in, man. You've got to turn on your microphone. That's all you got to do. You have to have a microphone on. Otherwise, StreamYard will not allow me to let you in. I want to let you in, but I cannot. I physically am not able to.
What? Really?
What? Who just said not really?
Not me. Oh, what that they did? What did you just say again? Sorry, 20 things.
That you have to be unmuted.
Yeah.
No, Mitch doesn't have his microphone connected, so StreamYard won't let you. You can't get in to the panel if you don't have at least your microphone. You don't have to have a camera, but if you don't have your microphone activated, they literally don't give you the ability to bring somebody into the stream. So Mitch has been coming into the backstage for the last hour off and on, and every time it says device is not connected, so he's got to get his microphone turned on. Otherwise,
you guys want to see something?
Or allow the permissions for the microwave. He might not allow for the microphone. Sorry, microwave.
Jason, shut up, dude. You don't know what you're talking about. Apparently, this is a very common problem in StreamYard.
No, but we didn't let me in when I signed in with my phone, and then I didn't have my microphone connected.
I'm gonna just share my screen real quick so everybody can just shut the hell up about is John lying? Dumbass questions.
No, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying that it did the same thing to me.
Jason, I wasn't referring to you. I was referring to somebody inside chat. Calm down, buddy. Down right
Yeah.
there.
Oh,
Device is not connected. You're seeing my screen, folks. I am not physically able to let somebody in if they are in that state. It's a problem with StreamYard. So, Mitch, connect your microphone and I'll let you in. Until then, I can't do anything for you.
All right. I'm out, guys.
All right. Have a good night, Bubble Gum.
See ya. God bless. Have a good night. Good night.
Night, Bubblegum.
Jackson, do you have a particular way that you view like right and wrong? Like, do you just haven't thought about it?
Not. If someone's nice to me, I'll be nice to them. That's my philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not very evolved, but so to speak. But yeah, it's just Canada thing is kind of funny.
Yeah, I have a lot of money in the stock market right now, so.
Oh, it's not funny for you then.
Oh, yeah, I hopefully it won't be that bad.
Well, just don't pull it out and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
I made that mistake back in 08. I didn't know any better. I was like, oh no.
Oh man, you had money back in 08? Because there hasn't been anything really bad since 08. Maybe in 2018 there was just something weird going on. But like,
there were
simply did not know any better.
Major market corrections in 2020. What are you talking about?
And compared to 08, I thought 08 was a bigger.
Not compared to 08, but there was a huge loss in. I mean, fuck, they stopped. They froze.
Oh yeah, I'm forgetting about COVID.
They froze the markets. It was crashing so bad. I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't really active in 2020, so I just started to become active in the stock market. But it recovered very fast. 08 was the crash kind of lingered, right? Or am I wrong about that?
No,
blue chip stocks only. Don't do money trading, currency trading. It's like gambling on the horses or anything else. It's addictive and it's really dangerous and you'll lose a lot of money real quick. Stay away from it.
Yeah, LPP, like I feel like the COVID crash recovered very fast.
Absolutely. The market correction, the revamp or the rebound of the past 2 years is the most
ridiculous,
moronically, stupidly artificial. I mean, it's like, okay, so
do you have an explanation for that, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's okay. So here's the thing, man. The S&P, it's up and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that all of the increase. There's a report on this that came out like I don't know, end of January. Basically, all of the increase that happened last year in like some of the biggest like the S&P stuff and whatnot. Anyway, long story short, it was because of 4 stocks accounted for it. For the entire growth, but 54% of the remaining stocks declined. Like so, it's big boom, everything is great. It's like no, actually, the majority of companies were way down. You just had a few big dogs.
It was like Tesla and Amazon and
that just blew through Walmart. Yeah, those big players, they blew through the roof. Their gains were massive. So yes, there was this, everything's great. It's like, no. On the surface level, it looks good. If you look below the surface, it's like, oh shit, we're in deep doo-doo. And so in multiple aspects of the artificial, so you had all this free liquid capital, right? Interest-free capital that was being tossed around. You had money being pumped in from the government. You had reduction in liabilities. You had the ability for them to do major stock buybacks with basically free money they weren't paying or basically minuscule interest on, right? Then you had a period of time where people were getting money for free, right? And being able to buy stuff, pay down some debt and all that kind of jazz. But at the same time, you have we're on a like 1,000-mile-an-hour trajectory for a massive commercial real estate correction. I mean, massive.
Real estate, yeah.
Well, not necessarily residential, but commercial real estate is on a beeline for implosion, right? So you have the Evergrande group, and it's the largest. It's like they're like twice as big as the Lehman Brothers were.
Oh yeah, right? That's the Chinese one. Ooh, they went down big time.
Well, they've declared bankruptcy, and they defaulted, and so imagine Danny, are you old? You remember Lehman Brothers? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, that's right, John. I remember that the Canadian banks were trying to encourage investment in China to stop China from crashing. That's what I remember.
So Lehman Brothers was like the catalyst for the 2008 collapse, right? When they
I remember this. Yeah,
it was like a cascade. It was a cascade.
But I was 15 years old, I think.
Right. So I'm sure you remember. You saw like headlines and stuff, right? Lehman Brothers was everywhere, right? Okay. Well, imagine you've got a player that is twice as big as the Lehman Brothers that has defaulted. Okay.
And that's not the only one.
Well, and there's a cascade that's happening right now, but like right now in China, when the day that everybody knew it was coming, but the day that Evergrande officially defaulted, like the Chinese government like halted their markets, like the whole nine, because otherwise they'd gone into full implosion, right? And right now, the Evergrande is like they're paying off their biggest creditors, like they're literally giving them planes and shit to keep them from like doing a call on some of their debt. Okay, like we're literally giving you a plane. Like don't call our debt because we've defaulted. We haven't paid you your interest and stuff that you're owed. Like here's a plane. Like this is what's happening, right? And their assets for
Chinese plane.
I don't know. Their assets, their real estate assets are something like $250 billion. Okay, and that's not accounting for all of their subsidiaries and all the other companies that are dependent upon them. It's nuts, dude. Like the cascade is crazy. So that's part of in my opinion, that's part of the reason that there's been a lot of this hesitation by the Fed to do what they've been talking about for months, which is, inflation is going through the roof. We've got to adjust interest rates to minimize inflation. But they know if they do that, all of this artificial stock increase is going to implode, right? And we also know that, and there's another report that just came in on this a couple days ago of Matt, and I've been on tirades about this over the past 6 months, that people in 2020, even if you ended up getting unemployment stuff and all kind of good jazz, in the interim to all that, people blew through their savings. They maxed out their credit cards, all that kind of stuff. So fast forward to where we are now, you've had a halt in the unemployment like the unemployment boosts and all that kind of stuff. The stimulus checks, I mean, heck, that was ages ago, and those were pennies on the dollar anyway, compared to what was.
Do you think there should have been a bigger stimulus, like more stimulus checks and stuff, or do you think that make things worse?
If they were going to do it, let me address that in a second. I have a thought on that. But where we are now, and this was shown to be correct. My assessment of this was shown to be correct beyond all doubt with the number, like the retail numbers and stuff from December versus November and such, and the decline. But anyway, the data is now in that, credit card debt is through the roof. Available credit has plummeted. Nobody has savings, or very few people have most people do not have savings, right? That's where we are now. So now we're heading directly into this, we need to raise interest rates problem for the Fed, right? Why is that going to affect the stock market? Well, we're heading into a recession because people aren't making money, even though supposedly all this, there's a lot of jobs to be had and greater pay and stuff, but it hasn't kept up with the inflation increase. So even if you're getting paid more, it's not accounting for the inflation is surpassing the increase in wages, basically. And you're coupling all that with people having spent all their savings as well as having maxed out their credit, or most of their credit, right? I'm talking about the average person. So anyway, and then you got things like Evergrande and other implosions, and that's just them as a major player. Dude, freaking, I think it was Pinterest. They stroked a check for $100 million to like kibosh all of their commercial real estate contracts. Like, here's $100 million, we're out, see ya. And just left. Terminated. It went 100% remote. Like all these bunch of major players, and you have like the WeWork company. So SoftBank from Japan, they invested like another $4 billion into that behemoth, and WeWork is like imploding as well, and they're a huge commercial real estate player.
I gotta go to bed, but I want to get your thoughts on the stimulus thing, and then I gotta go to bed.
So regarding the stimulus thing, and actually I went on tirade about this right at the very beginning. let me do the math. So there are around 130 million households in the United States, right? So that first $1.2 trillion that we spent, millions, billions, trillions. Let me get the math up here. 1.2 divided by 130 million. That would have been a check for $9,200. Then when you start doing the math on all the money that's been spent, it actually comes out to what we spent is liable per taxpayer or per household comes out to like 60, I think it was like 67K. So if the whole we're going to solve COVID via, lockdowns, all that kind of stuff, if that was true, then for the amount of money that we've spent, you could have stroked a check to every house in the United States for 60 grand and said, don't go to work for the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That's crazy.
But what did we get? We got $600 stimulus check, $1,200. I mean, we got I think the total, if you had kids and stuff, you get a little extra, but it's still pennies on the freaking dollar, right? Compared to, it's like, where the hell will this money go? All this money went to corporations and the biggest players were getting millions and millions of dollars, but the rest of us are now.
Yeah, weren't mortgage companies advertising forbearance and stuff like that, or?
Oh yeah, you can, absolutely. Don't pay on your credit card. Interest is still building up, but hey, you can not pay for it now. And it goes back to my earlier point of fast forward to where we are now. The average person doesn't have any money in the bank in their savings account, and they don't have available credit. And now the extra $300 a week or whatever it was for unemployment, that's gone. And then inflation has skyrocketed so much that even if they're getting a pay raise, it's still not keeping it. They're still the number that just came out this week was that the average person is now, even with the increase in pay, is short or having to spend $272 more per month than they were pre.
Yeah, and I could be just biased with respect to this, but I feel like that really screws over grade school teachers like me because our pay raises are so they're really hard to get because it has to be passed through lots of legislation, whereas a lot of private corporations, you can just go to your boss and ask for a pay raise. I can't do that, right? So it has to be pushed through the House and the Senate and our state government to get a pay raise. So it's just inflation really screws over government positions.
Oh yeah, and on top of that, we have just stone cold liars in government who are claiming that the inflation is not nearly as bad as it actually is, right? So those little clown shows have said that inflation's been 7.5%. Yeah, have you guys not been paying attention to the most common things that we spend money on? It's not 7.5%. Right? Cars are up 40%. The gas, let's think about this. Gas was $1.80 when pre-COVID, right? We're now sitting at $3.47 is the average a gallon for regular.
Oh yeah, I'm at 5 gallons a gallon.
Yeah, in California are $5
a gallon.
This is not I'm sorry. Where are you guys coming up with these numbers where it hasn't been that bad? I was at the grocery store earlier today, before I did the stream, and I was looking. I keep track of the specific things I buy all the time, and it's so there's one that's up 40%. This product's up 27%. This one's up 25%. This one's up 80%. All this kind of stuff, and it's but you're telling me that the inflation's only been 7%.
Yeah, it's all screwed up. I gotta go to bed or I'm gonna hate myself tomorrow. So y'all take care. See ya.
Good night, Danny.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, I miss those mean tweets now.
The mean tweets?
Yeah. I kind of suck. I didn't like Trump either, but still.
I don't understand. For anybody who has any baseline knowledge of economics, basic business, and whatnot, the fact that people that didn't like Trump, in my opinion, just showcased stunning ignorance of just basic economics.
Well, your average voter is an idiot. That's why I don't vote.
Well, I would agree with you on that in many ways, but
to me, I gotta say that about a year and a half ago, my truck broke down for the last time. I was so disappointed, and I ran out and I bought a new truck because the used trucks were already skyrocketing. I swear, the next month the price of new cars just went nuts because they had that chip shortage.
Yep.
I think my truck is worth more now than when I bought it. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's one of the rare times. The only other time that I'm aware of where used car values went up was the Cash for Clunkers program. And you remember that, Sam?
Yeah.
That was one of the dumbest. Well, either dumb, stupidity, or genius. It was genius if your actual objective was to remove millions and millions of quality used vehicles from the market and create an artificial increase in used car values, which they did exactly. And then fast forward to where we are now, create an even greater shortage of used cars. I mean, it's like, I still have not gotten over that. Part of the way that the dealerships got their money was you had to literally pour, I forget the substance, but it was something you had to pour into the engine block and basically like seize the engine block so that the car was completely worthless now in terms of like actually being able to be driven again. And then we shipped the freaking steel. We would crush them and send the cars to China. It's like, what is happening right now? I just don't even. Anyway, that blew me away back then, and that was the time when because anybody who's ever like your parents always told you like always remember that your car is a depreciating asset, and one of the major reasons to buy used vehicles was that a lot of the depreciation of the value would already have taken place before you bought it because of all the value lost when you drove it off the lot. Like that was a well-established concept, and now to your point, Sam, I mean they're going up in value. Like I'm buying a used car and it's worth more now than it was. Like my wreck that I had in July, to buy the exact same car with quite a few more miles was going to be like $6,000 more than what I'd paid 2 years prior for a car with more miles. Like that makes no sense.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
This is kind of unrelated completely, but did you guys know I bought land in Madagascar?
Oh, really?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So do we need to report you as a potential flight risk?
No. I mean, technically, I don't own the land, but I did pay for it.
Hey, Jackson, I got some land in Madagascar. It's beachfront. Just send me your money, and we'll make a deal.
Right.
Just kidding.
On its face, it does sound like a scam, but it actually wasn't.
I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona.
Yeah, this wasn't
I'll throw in the Golden Gate.
Okay. So how much land did you buy in Madagascar?
10 acres.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
How much is what's the going rate for per acre in Madagascar right now?
$2.
Depends on where it is. If it's in the remote,
$2.
It's pretty cheap.
It's better $50 or something.
No, it wasn't quite that cheap, but it was cheap.
Do you mind if I?
You can get land in Australia for about.
Huh?
You can get land in Australia for like real cheap, like cheaper, really cheap out in the desert and that. There's heaps that there's cattle stations in Australia that are 40,000 square kilometers. Not 40,000 square kilometers. That's amazing. They're incredible size cattle stations here, man. And land out there is just cheap as.
If you don't have to go to jail for 5 years, are you planning on absconding from the USA and heading on over?
As soon as I'm off probation, I'm going to go visit the land. Yeah, it's 75% forested, 25% of it was cut down. But
don't build your house in the trees.
Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town doesn't even have electricity. So,
wow. So you're gonna bring some solar panels and stuff with you?
Yes, I would have to if I'm gonna go out there.
Are you gonna live there for a while?
What?
Are you gonna live there for are you planning on living there? Just a holiday place?
No, it's really about conservation.
Research. Oh yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah, to buy the forest. It's near a place called Sahamina National Park. It's connected to it a little bit by a narrow corridor. And this guy who
Good
owned
idea.
it, this guy who owned it was a pastor / farmer kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I made a video about it on my channel. You can check it out. There's a picture of him in that video, standing by his little grass hut thing.
Yeah, Jackson, it always amazes me. In Australia, like in Tasmania, we've got the best forestry practices on earth. 85% of public land is locked up, and most of that is in old growth. They only log 15% of the state-owned land. 15% of it. Like, it's nothing. And what they do, I've lived in the forest here for years, and before I got my property, and I saw it. They log out one coop, like what they call a coop, like about 10 acres, and then they leave another coop adjoining to the natural forest beside it so the animals can, like a corridor, and then they don't log that coop for about 90 years, and then they log the next coop, and like I said, they're only logging 15% of it. And the Greens here, the conservationists, scream constantly about how all the trees are going to be wiped out every 10 years. Greens have been saying all the trees in Tasmania are going to be wiped out every 10 years since 1973. Yeah. And every 10 years comes around and all the trees are still here. It's like what they're doing is, this is my point, is that they're stopping them from logging in countries with fantastic logging practices and forcing them to rape forests to death where you bought the land. So good on you, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, someone says, how do I know it's not a scam? Because they sent me all the paperwork. And a primatologist that actually does the same thing kind of verified it for me. So it's definitely not a scam.
How far are you from? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I was gonna just ask, how far are you from Arkansas?
How far am I from Arkansas?
Yeah. Are you out? Are you over in that part of the country?
I'm in Arkansas. Yeah.
Oh, you are. Oh,
yeah.
Well, I mean, because land is cheap in Arkansas.
Yeah,
I bought a few lots out there.
Probably not as cheap as Madagascar, though.
Well, but you can get, you can get to it,
Yeah.
That's the thing. Because, especially out in the middle of nowhere, the off-grid thing, it costs more money than you think. You got to get a well or a water catchment and a structure. And if there's, not a town around, I have a piece of property that I go to that I've been slowly working on. And the closest town is like a good 20 minutes, but that's just like a one horse town, right?
Yeah.
If I want to get something like a Walmart sized town, it's 90 miles away. You know what I mean? So just the drive to get somewhere, like to go to a Home Depot, it's 90 miles each direction. So if I need to get like propane or get something like that for living, then so that land out in the middle of
Mitch, if you're blocked, I need to know what your screen name is so I can look for you in YouTube. In the admins, like see if I can find your screen name and figure out what happened, how you got blocked. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, yeah, well, I was just saying, like, if you're going to do, like, if your idea of living off-grid is like, how they would do it 200 years ago, then you might have a chance. But if you want any modern amenities, it's going to cost you, some money. So the more remote you are, at some point there's like a balance between, it's going to cost me this much just to get to and from town versus buy something a little bit closer to town. You know what I mean?
The closest village is called Antananarivo, I think. It's got a few things by third world standards. It has no electricity though, but you could get food, and that's about all. And not very good food, I would imagine.
Yeah, but, solar can solve a lot of those problems, but then again, like that, solar isn't cheap, and then you got to get batteries, and a good battery is,
getting all that up there would be expensive.
Yeah, and then if the neighbors see it and they want it more than you're willing to fight for it, then they're gonna get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the roads are so bad that what would take a 3-hour drive here took the guys that I'm in contact with that actually went up and bought the land, took them 12 hours to get there. These crappy unpaved dirt roads, mud, just eroded out roads.
Jeez. Yeah, we completely take our roads for granted, and also just the dramatic difference in speed, even on a paved road that's curvy and one lane and stuff. Man, good grief! It's astonishing how much longer it can take to get from A to B. I dealt with that in England. Good gravy. The roads suck so bad. Americans have no idea how awesome our roads are compared to most of Europe.
Oh yeah,
other than Germany.
You'd die if you came to Tasmania, mate. The roads here are just like, there's some roads at 100 kilometers an hour, which is 60 miles an hour, and they're barely wide enough to fit two cars running beside each other. You're screaming along at 100k, someone's coming 100 k's out the other side, you know what I mean? It's like, and the road's all bumpy and uneven, and you're bouncing around. You need a kidney belt.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
What part of Tasmania are you in?
Near Launceston.
Is that what direction of Tasmania? Like
I own 300. I own 300 acres here.
Oh, really?
Launceston's northern Tasmania.
Northern Tasmania, like northeast, northwest, or just north, kind of in the middle.
Yeah, sort of northwest. Yeah.
That's a good area. If I sent you some camera traps, would you set them up and tell me
Sure.
what you found?
Bloody oath, I will. Yeah, no worries, mate.
That'd be pretty
Not a
cool.
problem. That it's really sad that the Tassie Devils. The strange thing is you don't see Tassie Devils getting run over that much anymore, and when you don't see them getting run over on the roads that much anymore, you know they're not many around.
Yeah.
It's really sad. It's like when I first moved here, there was all these kites, you know, like birds of prey, kites flying around, like they used to fly around down the highway. And every time I drive down there, this is like 10 years ago, and every time I drive down there, there'd be like lots of run over and more run over, and eventually now they're just all gone. It's heartbreaking, you know. But I mean, at the same time, if you get, and Ken Ovens says this a lot, but it's true. If you got everybody on Earth, look how small Loch Ness is compared to the size of the planet. Empty Loch Ness, you can, if you stacked everyone on top of each other and side by side, you could fit everyone on Earth in Loch Ness. If you put everyone on Earth in Texas, they'd have 100 square feet of room each. I mean, this stuff about the Earth being overpopulated is rubbish. It's about the large corporations that are murdering the planet. And God said those that rape my planet for profit are doomed. Paraphrasing, of course. Anyway.
I would hope so. But yeah, I would. They had some fancy.
Yeah, you can send them to me
or something. The Tassie Devils.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I'll put them up on my property.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Okay, I'll give you my email.
I get really irritated with the people who run around claiming that the world's overpopulated. I'm just like, the only place it's overpopulated is in the metro areas that you dumbasses are trying to get everybody to move to. Let's think this through for just a second here. You want me to move to a place where the population density is over X. You want to increase that density to whatever. And yet, if you go around the world, you will quickly recognize that, oh, wait, we occupy less than 3% of the total surface area of the planet. I mean, it's like, if we're going to talk about us being overpopulated, you're just naive, in my opinion. But to Jason's point, it's not that there aren't things that we're doing that we could do better. It's just the fear mongering that comes from that. Just completely false assertions, and it's so obvious. The tactics are so obvious. Like, they know that most people live in, more than 50% of the world's population lives in a metro area. Therefore, the perspective of the average person is going to be from a area that is overpopulated. Therefore, they're going to be easily convinced that the world is overpopulated based on their own, day-to-day life. I mean, heck, if you live in some, Mumbai or whatever, you better believe it's overpopulated. You live in freaking Tokyo, or Mexico City has 35 million people. It's nuts. I wouldn't want to live there either. But then at the same time, you have morons in Nashville where there's sick in Nashville proper. It's square mileage wise is about the same as New York, except we only have 700,000 people in the same surface area that New York has 9 million.
Sheesh.
So if you're going to sit here and say that it's like the people on the talking heads in New York are like, the world's overpopulated, just look at New York. And it's like, yeah, same surface area in Nashville, right? It's not even remotely coherent to make the same comparison in terms of a surface area occupation perspective,
Yeah, I drove from Memphis to California. I mean, and there's like nothing in between. I mean, there's a few small. There's like Little Rock, and there's Albuquerque.
I'm 30 minutes north of Little Rock.
Yeah, there's not a lot.
And
Albuquerque, I love Albuquerque. Doug's Bunny.
And Little Rock's population is what, like 600,000-700,000, right?
No,
like
it's like 200,000 or 300,000.
No, I mean like the full metro area.
Oh,
like I think it is like the metro area. I agree. I'm sure that the proper is probably like 200,000 or 300,000, but
yeah, I thought Arkansas was a beautiful state. I drove through there.
Yeah, they're
especially the Ozarks, man. I mean, geez, I'd love to live out there. It's the middle of
nowhere.
Metro population is 738,000.
That's more than I would have thought.
Yeah, Jason,
but that's metro. That's metro though. That's going to be like the surrounding counties and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm technically in that.
Yeah, like the Nashville metro area is like 2 million.
Yeah.
But it's like, anyway, to your point, Sam, of like you drove for hours. And heck, when you got to Texas, I mean, hell, you drive for an entire day to get across Texas. And
yeah, there's nothing.
Drive, then you're what, New Mexico? Basically nothing except for a few cities and like some reservations, right? But then the reservations, in the small towns, it's like population 200. Like you should drive. And it's like
maybe there's a speed, maybe there's a stop sign, maybe.
Yeah, like I remember looking at this. Let me look it up real quick and see population of per mile Wyoming is something ridiculously low. Yeah, okay, 5.85 people, so 6 people per square mile of Wyoming. It's like ridiculously low. Alaska, there's 1 person per mile in Alaska.
Hey, John, can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know where you mean, Jackson. You mean the Northwest Forest. I lived up there for months up in those forests. They're absolutely amazing, mate. And I'll tell you, they are, the logging practices there are unbelievably good. Like they really... Man, if you lived in the forest like I did and see the way they logged it here, you'd be really impressed. It's just really annoys me when they stop Australian companies or cut back on Australian companies making wood. Like they were going to build a paper mill here, and the Greenies got it shut down. They were going at it for about a decade. They eventually got it stopped, and now we ship all our wood chip to Japan, and Japan makes the paper for us. I mean, it had the best environmental practices on the planet, the paper mill and everything. They just, mate, what they're doing here, the green. Like one time, Jackson, each river and creek in Tasmania, they're not allowed to log 200 meters either side, even if it's a little thin creek. They have to leave 200 meters either side of the creek to leave corridors for the animals. And the Greenies, what they went down and filmed where they logged right down to the water's edge, and they said, look at how they're logging down, they're breaking. That was up on the news and everything. You know what they did? I found out they logged through this place to log down to the water's edge to put a bridge across so they could get the logs out. And the Greenies only filmed in that area where they logged. They didn't show. Really, really lying bastards here, man. Bad. So I'll tell you right now, most of the stuff you hear about Tasmania, like I heard that the leatherwood trees are going to be wiped out in 5 years, and I got here and there's hundreds of millions of them everywhere. They just, they need to start logging in like the practices like we've got here are like you've just heard, are the best in the world. Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful. It's pristine, even in the areas where they're logging. It's really beautiful. I mean, you see the coops, like this was logged in 1960. This was logged in, they say when it was logged, and you see the coops regrowing. And okay, you lose some species, but like I said, 85% of public land is locked up. And it's all locked up in old growth. Huh?
Can I tell you a story about logging?
Oh, yeah.
It's related to this picture. And they sent me a bunch of pictures of this, but also a couple of videos of this thing on its perch.
Poor animal. Yeah.
You can actually hear in the background people chopping down trees.
Yeah.
This is called an indri. It's the largest lemur species. There are between 1,000 and 10,000 of them left. Yeah. And that was filmed on that 10 acres near Zahamina National Park.
That's really sad.
So
So,
on your land.
So, ladies and gentlemen, real estate agents in Madagascar, if you want to get environmentally conscious individuals in the United States to buy land, send them pictures like what we just saw, and you will grasp at the heartstrings and open the wallet.
Yeah, I tried it. They all say, "Oh, that's a scam." It's like even after I showed them all the proof, it's like, no, it's just too good to be true. And it seems like it's too good to be true, but they sent me videos going to Zaamina National Park, and I geolocated where they were all along the way by satellite imagery. They went over this bridge in between Antananarivo Village and Zaamina National Park, and I found the exact bridge on satellite imagery. So that's the world's most elaborate scam.
Well, yeah. Right on. Okay, gentlemen, it is.
Well, I won't scam you.
We're now at 3 hours and 45 minutes.
Paperwork that came with it.
So
it's my bedtime.
It's bedtime. Yep, it's kind of call it a night. So, everyone has last words. We will do so, and we'll wrap up. Jason, you got anything you want to say?
Good night. God bless.
Appreciate it, Sam.
Yep. Good night. God bless.
All right, we're keeping it short and sweet tonight, folks. Jackson.
Yeah, I just want to say I definitely didn't get scammed. So that's all.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think that's a brilliant idea. People should do more of that. And then they'd force, they need to start getting, they need to start looking at Tasmania and their logging practices and start implementing it in their own countries. Because and what they need to do is stop the big corporations coming in there and taking over all the logging and allow the people and say, all right, you can log this area, but you got to leave. You got to only log this much and leave that much for an animal corridor, and you can't log near rivers and creeks, and you can't. But we're going to let you do it, and we're going to let you get some profit from it. And we're not going to let the big corporations come in and just take it over. Then it would really work.
Yeah. Hey, Jason, I'm going to email you about the camera thing.
Okay. That's all right, man. I'll be watching for it.
Okay.
Okay. See
all
ya.
Right. Well, thanks, everybody.
God bless. Bye.
Appreciate everybody for sticking around for all this time and going through the interesting back and forth conversations with Danny and Pine Creek and Sam and Jay Robin and everybody else who came in. I want to say thank you very much. And as always, as we end these things out, I always say, as you contemplate the different pieces of evidence put forth, the concepts, the arguments, and ultimately utilize your critical thinking skills to come to a conclusion about what is the more logical, plausible, and probable explanation for your existence, make sure that the conclusion you reach is just that: logical, plausible, and probable. Have a good night, everybody. Appreciate you very much.